Hello and welcome to an episode of Casual Friday. I'm here with the Duck. As always, the show is brought to you by Woo. Links available in the description below. Don, the monthly close is in 15 days, and I don't know if we've ever discussed this level on the show, but there seems to be a really key inflection point at 59k, and every single candle close is the most high signal consequential thing I've ever seen. So could you give us your monthly time frame commentary at this very important level that's done a lot of good for the industry?
I mean, we actually almost hit the support below it. Like I have a support at 47, and we almost made it there. But yeah, it's kind of shit, right? Like we've been hanging around this 59 level, and every time it looks like we're finally gonna kind of move away from it, get sucked back in. Yeah, I mean, it's the fact that we're leaning on the support so hard is obviously not great. The only kind of argument that I can see that you could make in the case of the bulls is that we had like a washout this month. Like we had a proper wick, almost reaching the lower support. So technically, that makes the support a little bit better, because what you don't like to see is you hang on top of the support and you have a bunch of people basically buying that support, hoping that's going to go up. And then if there's not been a washout, you're just basically sitting with all of those people, especially when they're doing it on leverage, which has been the case. You're sitting in the same position as all of those people, right? And then when you get the washout, which we had, at least those people are washed out, but we're still sitting at that shitty support. So I mean, it's not great. It's not terrible. It's kind of like when you fully zoom out and you completely ignore that, like, that support's been hammered so much, it's kind of crazy that we're still hanging at 60k, right? Like that's pretty high level just considering what we've had before. So yeah, I don't know, like the monthly is a little bit of a wash still. It's still a garbage time frame.
Yeah, it hasn't been doing it. I mean, its job, as we discussed, is the high time frame nukes into support, as opposed to
Yeah.
leaning on levels, stuff like that. I don't think it's fully done that yet. I mean, it came close, but in terms of just like really scary turbo nuke, like deep wick into monthly support, that hasn't happened yet.
No.
It's also funny, the whole signal of, now that range low has been washed out, those participants aren't there. That argument could have plausibly been made last month as well, at least to some extent, right? Because
Yeah.
we spiked 4 months worth of lows and closed above. And I was like, hey, that's better than before, but this time frame I'm just kind of ignoring it because those signals at 59k acting as support haven't led to any moves higher. So that's like a rough looking trade for someone who took that sweep kind of at face value and had a mechanical entry. Spike the low, close above, buy that, and you literally bought the top and then probably got owned on the move below
Yeah.
previous month's low. And that becomes like a dangerous at a certain point. Just more meta commentary. It becomes dangerous at a certain point if you're always looking at levels and you're giving it infinite opportunities to sweep, spike, and you don't adjust your bias at any point, right? It's like, oh, we're
Yeah.
just running the lows. And it's like, oh, we're just running the lows again. Oh, we're retesting the lows. It's like at a certain threshold, sort of have to adjust your frame of mind and realize that the market is just very heavily leaning on a level. And spikes and sweeps and failed breakdown setups, all that type of stuff, they're only consequential if they force traders to act and they're trap traders, or there's a massive washout. If that's not the case and the market's just bleeding towards the lows over and over again, or as we've had on the way up, the market just like spiking the highs over and over again but never actually reversing, that presents the opposite signal. But as monthly time frame enjoyers, I think the argument that's been made for a while that 59k is a support, but whatever, the candle closes may be more significant, as in if it closes below, all the nukes into support are the ideal sort of candidates for setups on this time frame, and everything else is noisy. I think that's at least aged quite well, because dude, it's been 4 or 5 months of monthly bias is intact and there's fuck all to show for it, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, the monthly's just been like, I generally think when you get like a massive nuke, and for example, like that 49k wick that got so close, right? Like that
Yeah,
would have been exactly what we were talking about for the last 5
6
months,
years.
right? Yeah, like you get a proper washout on the monthly into a high time frame support level, which 47k is.
Yes.
Like that's why we talk about it. It got really, really close, right? Like it would have just taken like a couple more people to get liquidated, and that would have been a really good entry. This is why I kind of like this washout more than the previous one, because the previous one didn't really go anywhere, right? This one like proper tested people, fucked people over, and then reversed like got pretty close to high time frame support, whereas the other one, like the previous month, just didn't.
Yes.
Like didn't really do anything. So yeah, I like it better here than I liked it last month. But just generally the monthly is a little bit rough. But
Agreed.
like when you really like zoom out, which technically that's what the monthly is for, we had a massive rally from 16K all the way to 70K, and we have a non-existent pullback.
Yes.
Right? Like just ignoring everything else. Like technically, if this was a 4-hour chart, people would be hilariously bullish on it, I think. So, but given it's a monthly chart and given that we've been chopping for so long, that's just not the case. And given the macro situation too, right? Like a bunch of people are very nervous because of it, and rightfully so, I think. The situation looks a little bit different, but I think it's important to not lose sight of like what this chart, like if you turn off all the lines, right? Like if you just hide the lines and you look at this chart, really doesn't look that bad.
Yes. I mean, it's shocking as well, right? We've never spent this much time basically meandering close to an all-time high. So
Yeah.
all the previous examples that we've discussed of, it's just the all-time high jitters and people kind of early leverage, adding leverage for the breakout trade, getting washed out before it eventually goes up. You know, one of the prevailing theses at the time was that we're just getting started at 70K because the real fun happens when you accelerate through all-time high in that kind of multi-week, multi-month period. And like all of those previous models have been wrong, essentially.
Yeah. It's just like it's been a weird time, and the market's been trading weird too. Like it's different now than it used to be, just because of the ETF flows, because of a heavier lean into the macro situation, right? And then also because a bunch of governments are selling Bitcoin all the time. Like it's either like people are laughing about Germany selling at 60K now, like apparently the US is selling at 58. At least there's rumors flying around. So you kind of have this weird situation where you just have a bunch of like entities that don't really care about the price, just selling, which is not necessarily typical, right? Like usually when you have a bunch of people that own something, they care about the price and they're gonna sell like differently. They're gonna sell when the market nukes too much and they're in too much pain. Or they're gonna sell when they're euphoric as fuck at highs, if they're like decent at least, which I think is quite rare. But I mean, get the point. Like people trade very differently if they're agnostic versus when they're not. And big holders usually are not agnostic to where the price is. So like it's a little bit of a like it trades differently, and something that like to take into account, I think.
Yeah, that's very fair. I think as we'll discuss in the news section, it's also just been a story of a lot of supply hitting the market from different sources. It's like old coins that haven't moved in ages, been selling, and then all these entities, Silk Road, US government, German government, DonAlt, etc. And that's just created very sort of unusual supply-demand mechanics given where the market is. You know, like we have those expectations, like why would you sell the all-time high, yada yada, everyone's in profit type of thing. But as you mentioned, if you're price insensitive, you kind of don't give a shit. And the opposite may be even true, that not only even if you do give a shit, it acts as incentive to sell because you're like, oh well, the price is up so much, you know.
Yep.
I wanted to get a clarifying point about the monthly. So just to be clear, for you, it really matters when it comes to long wicks, sweeps, spikes, SFPs, whatever. It sort of adds more confluence if the low of that move ends up at a high time frame level of support versus just spiking something nearby.
If it's just like hanging around the same level, it basically I'm like, okay, the high time frame, like does that really matter for the high time frame people? To me, I don't think so. Like, but the wick towards like a high time frame level of support, that's more interesting, I think, to me at least.
No, it makes sense. Confluence and all that.
Yeah, exactly.
Jazz. Let's discuss the weekly time frame, which I think is one of the probably the most interesting time frame for all this type of stuff and has the most going on. So on Monday markets, whenever I fucking did that show, sorry everyone, I talked about the line chart showing bearish weekly market structure. And I think the title was like, don't fall for this don't get trapped by this Bitcoin pattern or something. And it was actually around the time that the high was being made. And I basically looked at the line chart and said, you know, as much as the market, it's tempting to sort of over-index on the reclaim 60K, back below 60K, reclaim 60K, that whole type of thing. And we actually spoke about this like probably over a month ago at this point, right? That there's always a risk when you get range reclaim setups that the reclaim itself is good, but you're targeting the other side of the range, and instead, the lower leg is a break in market structure, and the bounce up doesn't make it to the range high, forms a lower high instead, and then sort of bleeds back down. And I think that's just like an inherent risk if you're trading failed breakdowns, because there's been a breakdown, there's been a shift in market structure by definition, and the reclaim is one signal, but that doesn't guarantee a stress-free path to the range high, because there's always a risk that that breakdown is still quote-unquote legit, and the bounce that generates the so-called reclaim is just a corrective lower high before trend continuation and a lower low, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's just worth bearing in mind if you're trading. The thing is, it works both ways, right? So if you're trading the range reclaim, you need to be aware that the reclaim setup may not play out fully if market structure kind of takes precedence and it forms as a lower high. But it works the other way around as well. If you're trading market structure, and you're looking for a lower high, it could be the case that the range reclaim kind of narrative dominates, and there is no lower high, and the range reclaim takes you to the new highs or the range highs. So it's sort of both sides of the coin are applicable. The weekly time frame at the moment, I don't think bearish market structure has quite shifted yet.
No.
If you're going from the March high, and then there's the May low, lower high, and then the big breakdown was the lower low. And then we made another lower high at around 68K. And now we're in this awkward area, pretty much around 58, 59, where it's not a lower low, because, we're still above the low that we made last time on the closing basis. But market structure hasn't reversed yet in the form of a higher high. Now, I don't know what your view is, but when it comes to these types of dominant trend or dominant market structure setups, the lower risk setup is just to wait for a higher high and the clear sign of strength and shift from that lower high, lower low pattern. And then the higher high sets your bias, and you either break out by it on like a systematic type of entry, or after the higher high, you start fishing, you go on an expedition on lower time frames to find low time frame dips, or dips on slightly lower time frames into something that looks like a higher low. That's like the lower risk sort of entry, just to wait definitively for market structure to shift via a higher high. Alternatively, for the faster entry, better entry at higher risk, you essentially start fishing for a higher low while the lower highs are still intact. And that would kind of have to be around this area, at least on the line chart type of thing, because we're pretty fucking close to the lowest close on the weekly, or the bottom of the line chart on the weekly. And so if your argument is, I want the better entry because I think this is going to be a higher low, this kind of has to be the area where it takes place, because if it goes back to the low or the lowest close, then by definition, it can't be a higher low. I hope I haven't fucked up any of the terminology. That's at least what makes sense to me. Like, weekly market structure is still at the very least suspicious, if not outrightly bearish. If you want to get around that, the lower risk, more quote-unquote confirmation option is the higher high. And the higher risk, less confirmation option near the current prices has to be a higher low. And everything else is, I think, less compelling. What do you think of the weekly? Do you think this line chart analogy makes sense? Are there other levels? What do you think?
Yeah, I think everything you said makes sense. And I'm just looking at this. I have redrawn my weekly chart somewhat. Basically, mostly focused around the 6th of May candle, like the lowest close before we had that breakdown. Like, I have boxed that 6th of May candle out. And that's been acting as resistance pretty much the last 2 weeks.
I had that bottom level as the range low as well at a certain point. Just highest close, lowest close. That's a pretty nice area, I think.
Yeah, and I think basically, like, and now I have the range high on the 3rd of June. So basically the high of that move, that following move after that cluster. And I think we've just basically, and this is not great, I think this is quite clearly a bearish chart, honestly. We've moved into a lower range now, where the range high is 62K and the range low is 51. That cluster that acted as support on the bounce. Like, that's kind of how I look at the weekly time frame. It's lower highs, lower lows. Doesn't really make much sense to argue any different, I think. Even though I want to argue different, right? Like, I look at the monthly, I'm like, oh, there's actually, like, maybe this reverses from here. And I look at, like, lower time frames, like, maybe the low is actually in. I look at the weekly time frame, and that really doesn't look that good. So, like, you have a little bit of conflicting time frames again. It just goes to show how choppy the market is. But yeah, for me, we basically retested that resistance. We've been getting rejected by it. There is actually, I think, a decent chance that we go back to 52. It's just we would have to hold that, I think. Otherwise, it starts looking really ugly really fast.
Those are
So
good
yeah,
levels. I mean, they make sense.
yeah,
I think the part that sort of sucks is that if you take it from a purely market structure point of view, this area is kind of shitty.
yeah,
And if you take it from a updated range levels point of view, like I've got your levels on my chart now, it's kind of shitty too because it just looks like an underside retest.
yep,
So I mentioned that for the if you have the market structure perspective, you either need a higher low like close to here, and I don't like any of the weekly supports, at least up in the 58 like sub close to 60k. I don't like any of the weekly supports. And then if you want strength, it has to be what 64 plus.
yep,
I think and look, this is again a sign of conflict. There's a world in which you long 61 plus or 64 plus based on range levels, and it's another fucking lower high.
yep,
Like that's completely plausible, right? Because you have to think
yep.
if there's going to be a lower high, where would it be? And by definition, it would have to be a lower high than the 69k high or whatever. And so your trouble area becomes what anywhere from like 62 to 65ish, 64 in the middle, whatever. That becomes a problem area. And I think this is a good example of like there are no sort of guarantees in trading. You always have to make a bet at a certain point. Like if you're betting on the range reclaim, you're sort of inherently betting that it's not going to be a lower high. And if you're betting on a market structure reversal, your market structure continuation, you're hoping that it's not one side of the range to the other because you need the market to stop before the high is violated or anything else. But I think it just makes this 60k area kind of shitty. And I also think 60k itself as a pivot has been less useful. I don't know if you agree with that, but I sort of checked out mentally of using that as a line in the sand when the market structure picture started to become more clear. And if you've sort of traded systematically above 60k long, below 60k short type of thing, at least more recently, that's been pretty rough. So I wanted to ask, with your current chart, what would the high probability weekly signals look like? For example, would you be willing to buy a redip into 51, 52 as a kind of wick backtest type of meme? Would you be willing to buy strength above 64? How does this chart translate to trade ideas?
I actually I don't mind the retest of 52 necessarily. Like even on the lower time frames, that wouldn't be the end of the world. Wouldn't be the first time that we've retested like a large wick that we've made and then actually started moving up. So yeah, that would be decent. The strength argument, I think if we get back above 64k, and I mean, I have said this in the past and it's been hilariously wrong. I'm glad I haven't traded on this because I mean, the market's just been too choppy. But if we reclaim 64, I would guess that we're actually just going to go back like higher. The problem is at that point, like with how the market's been trading, like a large percentage of the move you've already kind of done. So it's a little bit tough. I think you kind of have to like slap your balls on the table and be like, okay, I think this is gonna go up, so I'm gonna bet. Or you have to be like, hey, I don't know what the fuck's going on and just stay out. I think shorting here seems kind of silly to me at this point in time. Like, I mean, obviously there is like some room left towards like 40k. Like, I think that's the lowest it could go, like 40, 43, 44k. But if you're expecting new highs, that's like that is starting to like be just a little bit too little reward for what you're risking. So I think like at this point you either have to just be like, okay, I'll take the bet even though the market looks really shit, or you just have to be like, okay, I'm gonna stay out and I'm gonna have to wait for worse prices, basically, as in like 64k, and then you could still get reversed on, like you said, or like a higher high, and then you're gonna have to eat shit on the pullback that's gonna come afterwards, because you like, let's say this goes above like 69, 70k, right?
Yes.
Makes a new high, then you'd be like, okay, this is like this whole downtrend is invalidated. Let me buy the dip. But what if there's no dip, right? Because there's a good chance that this would just rocket upwards. So you kind of in this situation where you would have to buy like at that level, like around 70k, just to make sure that you actually have a position if it starts rallying. But then there's a good chance it actually just pulls back towards like 64k. Like just looking at
Yes.
the chart, like that would be the best support that you have. And then you're sitting in there in a position from 70k and it goes to 64. and that would just kind of suck, right? So you're in a shit situation no matter what you do if you trade this technically. One thing that I will say is that like I was really bearish for quite a while, right? Just like in this like 70 to 60k range. I was like, I'm sure this is gonna break down. We've had the 60k level like a million times. Now I'm much less so, just because I think like a lot of the altcoin froth has washed out. A lot of the kind of sentiment that was like way too exuberant just kind of like stopped being so. Like I think people are actually leaning more bearish now than they were before. So on that front, it's not as bad as it was, like quite significantly better. TA front is clearly bearish, I think, when you at least look at the best time frames. And I think like the weekly is the best time frame that we have. But I still like looking at this, even though I have a very clearly bearish chart in front of me, I'm not as bearish as I was. Like I look at this and I'm like I just want to skip the weekly because it doesn't agree with how I feel about the market, which is the first time in a while that that's been the case. So all that to say is like I don't fucking know. I'm not as bearish as the chart would indicate, because I think the chart is clearly bearish.
But the washout did a lot for you in terms of just the market as a whole, right? Like BTC, how it affected altcoins and sentiment around pump farm, which we'll discuss, like all that type of stuff, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's just like basically the mood has shifted substantially so, without actually having done much. Like if you look at this, why I said earlier on the monthly, like if you just turn off all the lines, you look at the monthly, it's not that bad, right? Like this pullback is fucking hilarious when you talk about like moving from 16k to 70k. And the thing is, like, even if this, and I think this is still a possibility, even if it goes towards like 40k, the monthly is still gonna look excellent, right? And then it's just, you're gonna just have to be bullish from there.
We just got spoiled on the uptrend, to be honest, on the BTC front.
Yeah, it's just that there's been no pain, right? And I think people expected no pain forever, and I think that's what led to this kind of like just stupid price action on a lot of the altcoins, stupid behavior on the meme coins. Like all of that is just basically because people forgot how pain feels like, and they have relearned how pain feels like in this Bitcoin range. I think a lot of the altcoins are down like 70% ish, like 50 to 70%. Like the good ones, the bad ones just never even made new highs, and it's just like back at the lows.
And the dispersion of returns again has been just mind-boggling, right? Like if you've been long BTC Sol the whole time versus your long Ethereum beta, whatever that means, like your
I mean Lido is trading at the lows. Like literally back to like $1. I don't know if you've seen Lido, but like that's literally back on the USD pair.
Your portfolio has missed out on, on 2023 and 2024 essentially,
which has been some of the best like price action.
Arbitrum as well. Have you looked at that chart, by the way?
No, actually I haven't.
Go take a look at ARB USD.
Yeah, I mean
do you know what I mean? Like what the fuck?
Yeah, like I mean if you're sitting in these, I mean you've just been fucked.
Atom? Like, I think Atom is wrecked too, right?
Oh yeah, Atom's. I mean, Atom you don't even need to ask.
I mean, look at that. Like in the past, it used to be the case that like crypto's in the bull market. If you own any part of crypto doing anything, you're up. Just like guaranteed, no questions. Throw a dart at the dartboard type of thing. Whereas this cycle, it's just been absolutely insane. If you've picked wrong or timed wrong or rotated at the wrong time, not only have you underperformed, in some cases you just straight up didn't make any money in a crypto bull market, and that's essentially unheard of outside of people getting like liquidated and stuff, I also wanted to mention one thing on the BTC front. I really agree with the sort of analogy you made, where a lot of the time if you sort of force yourself to buy strength and be like, okay, fuck it, this is good enough, and you just do it, that you end up buying a local top, and then you have to like stomach the pullback. I think two things come to mind. The first is a lot of the time that's just, it's better to have that expectation set rather than being surprised by it. Like if you're using really sort of line in the sand, momentum oriented signals that like no matter what I will buy above here, no matter what I will sell below here, Maybe there's a better way of doing things, but sometimes it just works if the signal is strong enough. Like BTC 35k breakout or whatever, that weekly reclaim 32k. That was like a really good example of where you just need to become agnostic as to the exact entry and just say, look, there's so much fucking upside. This is a strong signal. I don't care about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% fluctuations in my entry, right? So having that expectation set beforehand is really helpful. Another trick that I've sort of mentally used in the past to cope with taking those systematic entries, even if from a trading perspective the entry isn't very precise, I basically treat it as if my previous bias is being liquidated. So in my head, I'm being liquidated and forced to buy if I had a bearish bias and got like a really strong counter signal, or the other way around as well. Kind of, I'm being forced to sell, and if I'm being liquidated, then I don't have any right to complain about my exact execution price, you know?
Yeah.
Except I just view it as my bias is getting liquidated and I have to pay for it, as opposed to my position being liquidated. Maybe that helps someone, but for me, that's, you know, in moments where it's been hard to pull the trigger on kind of outright systematic strength or weakness signals, I treat it that way. Like, hey, it's just the cost of doing business. My bias got liquidated, so I have no right to fret about my entry price and try to be too precise about it.
Yeah, I like it.
What do you think of so you mentioned you'd rebuy like 51, 52k potentially. What do you think of the wick backfill type of thesis? I tweeted about it a little bit. It's a bit of a weird one. Sometimes it just straight up doesn't work. The most notable example, and I tweeted about this one as well, was actually the March 2023 one, where there was that long weekly wick. And I was like, hey, this looks pretty good and it's into weekly support. You know, if that backfills, I think that was it anyway, could be wrong. No, I'm pretty sure that was it. And I was like, you know, if this backfills even a little bit, it would be backfilling back into weekly support, which is that weekly cluster from the 20th of June 2022. That was the setup I was waiting for, being like long wick, big spike, decent chance of a backfill. If that goes there, that's like an A+ type of setup. And obviously it didn't fucking happen, right? Some of the wicks get backfilled in weird ways, like the ETF high wick on the 8th of January 2024. That was a bit of that's the kind of standout wick, and we traded at the lows of the range, and then obviously just kind of shot up since then. A lot of the wicks at the lows in the first half of this 60 to 70k consolidation ended up being backfilled. I wouldn't say they were as in your face or as sort of radical as the one from last week, but you know, the market eventually made its way back down there and retraded those prices. It's like the old adage of if it prints there, it'll trade there type of thing, except when it doesn't. So I mean, do you have any kind of framework or model for when to expect and or whether to trade these types of backfill setups, or is it entirely discretionary? Like, hey, the market's back here and it's not as scary as it may be if we didn't have a wick there type of thing.
Yeah, it's discretionary. Like I don't think there's a good rule like, okay, you can always do this. But just generally, like if you have decent price action or like a really good high time frame level, like for example, you go on the daily time frame, right? And you have that massive wick to the downside that we had on the 5th of August. And you have good weekly or monthly kind of support in that area. And then you just kind of, you're like, okay, I think these monthly and weekly levels, they're going to hold. So any kind of fill back into that area is just going to be a decent entry. And then I think that's decent. Whereas if you're just kind of like, if it's just doing it because there's a wick, but there's no high time frame levels, there's no real underlying bias that you should have, I don't think it's going to work. So in this case, there's like, you kind of struggle, and this is why I'm like not like why I wasn't entirely sure. Like I like it from a feelings basis, but I like the reason why I'm not as excited about 52, 51 as I would be otherwise is because 52 and 51, besides having like the weekly level, like I wish there was a monthly level there. I wish there was like a little bit more than just one red candle on the weekly time frame. But that weekly, like that one weekly time frame is like already somewhat enough to take the chance if you get good low time frame action around 52k. I think it's just not as clear cut as other times where you have like really, really good like high time frame supports. You're like, oh yeah, I like this. But I do like when if you do 52.2 on the daily time frame, I think that's the nearest support that we have. And it is also confluent with weekly support. So you could argue like if we go low, you have like at least a little bit of confluence there.
Yes.
But Yeah, we are also like on the daily time frame. Right now at support, in my opinion. So like
What have you
the
got? You got the lowest close from 1628 or something, the
um
58.2 or something
yeah,
else.
yeah, that like I
Is it
have
the low or the
basically
body?
I have those two red candles that led to the big up move boxed out. So between like 58 and 57.3.
Oh yeah, I see
Those
more
those two
recently. Okay.
those two like small candles, and that's kind of been support, and that's where we're bouncing from right now. And the reason why, like, this gives a little bit of added context to 52, because if you break this level, I think this is quite an important level. You'd probably like wash out again.
Okay.
And I think that could, like, that would lead to a bigger move than, because you could argue, like, hey, there's support at 55, right? That is where the big candle up started to happen.
Sure.
I don't like it as much. I would prefer like 52 at that point. But I also wouldn't want to be bearish into this support right now. I think
Okay.
this is basically the best, like this is the best daily level that we have, 50, 50, 58 to 57.3, like
Yeah,
that
got it.
box. And yeah, if you think that there's going to be any strength, and I think it's not the worst chart to assume strength, this would be the level. So that's kind of like what we're dealing with. Like I look at the daily time frame, it's at support. I look at the monthly. We had a little bit of a washout, and just generally still chilling above support, even though it had all the chances to break down. Like those two are like giving indications that, hey, maybe there's going to be some strength. And then you look at the weekly time frame, and you have like a god awful chart that looks so hilariously bearish that you're going to struggle. And then you go on ETH, and you actually find for the first time in a long time that like that chart is at support.
But also,
Both.
don't look at the S&P if you're going through the motions on all that
Yeah,
type of
yeah, and I
stuff.
mean, like that's the thing, you know. Like there's so much there's so much complicated shit now.
Yeah.
The one thing that I do like is that you have at least the daily and the monthly at support on Bitcoin, while ETH actually also is at support. So
Yes.
at least there's a little bit of confluence there, but the weekly time frame on Bitcoin looks hideous. So like I'm kind of like in between wanting to be bullish, just based on like how the market is trading, how sentiment is, and then like my favorite time frame just being hilariously bearish.
You basically have
And
to pray for the snowball, like time frame snowball in these cases,
yep,
right?
yep,
Where you're like, this daily is kind of shit and it's nowhere near as good as the weekly, but I hope it does its job, and then it fixes the weekly, and then the monthly looks even better, yada yada yada.
yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Like if we start trading above 64K on the weekly time frame, you have like a decent bullish setup.
Yes.
And then technically the monthly would close above 61
Again.
which it needs to basically.
Yeah.
And then you can make an argument, yeah.
Sure.
But it is a little bit far-fetched. And I like, that's why I'm like not beating the bull drum right now, because if I didn't have this ugly weekly, I would have actually been like, hey, I mean, this is like sentiment is right, and like the time frames are right, but it's the weekly that just kind of like hinders that.
And the weekly time frame out of all of them is the one that's been fucking all these setups, right? Like the daily 60K reclaim, that type of stuff has been unambiguous. The monthly hasn't closed below the 59K level, and it's really been sort of the weekly time frame FUD, sort of the lower highs and the range highs that's been fucking those time frames out of their bullishness. So it makes sense to kind of index more towards that. Also, funnily enough, Don, if you remember your weekend pump support at 61, 62K, at least it was good resistance on the other side of it.
It was. Yeah.
Never forget that level. Dude, I wish I fucking kept this on my chart, because there was like a Monday markets from like 1826 where I had 63.1 basically as a sort of range high. And I mean, that's been a total pain in the ass as well. And that's also what made this whole 60K reclaim level sort of wash for me, because I'm like, it just stopped making sense to use that as a clear line in the sand, because the moves on the reclaim were getting smaller and smaller, and the moves below it were getting sort of bigger and bigger, the breakdown. So it was just a bit of a pain in the ass. But yeah, I agree. Look, even if you go to the daily 63K, you're in that same weekly 64K territory. So in most cases, anything that you get from the monthly or the daily, they're probably visible on the weekly as well. And given the weekly's been the most kind of dominant time frame, I'd personally skew more towards that. Although more casually, certainly at this show it wasn't recording, the sort of pub talk version would be 57, 58k is like really short-term prey support. If it washes out, you bid the wick refill at close to 50 and hope it holds. And if that doesn't hold, then you eat your losses on the 50k refill and just fucking bid monthly support and pray. That seems to me to be the colloquial casual version of this thing. What do you think?
Yeah, pretty much exactly it.
Fantastic. I think that's it for BTC. I mean, the 4 hours basically same shit and pretty low time frame anyway. The monthly isn't going to change or do shit. The weekly is the most important time frame, most likely, but it's also the slowest moving. And if you want a bit of shorter term commentary, the nearest pivot is your 57.4 58k cluster. And if that doesn't hold, then we're all playing wick refill or are we fucking dead type of Russian roulette.
Yeah, and you never know.
You never know. You never know.
You never know.
Fantastic. You mentioned ETH, Don, and you've been bull posting ETH.
Yeah.
Which
actually,
dude, it's been so funny being like, oh, now lol, he's bullish ETH type of thing, and like as if you've been beating the ETH bull drum for God knows how long. Whereas anyone who's watched this show or your streams for any amount of time knows that there's no chart that gives us more anxiety in general, dismissive bearish vibes than ETH BTC. Although speaking of washouts, and I'm sure this contributes at least in part to your whole washout thesis, this thing at least kind of hit monthly support, right?
It did. Yeah.
So the washout isn't just on the BTC open interest plus got pretty close to the monthly support side. It's also on the ETH BTC side at what 043 if you're being really generous. Is a monthly support, and then it came pretty damn close to just 0.4 in general, or if not traded that.
And it perfectly hit monthly support on ETH USD as well.
Yeah, so talk us through. I mean, do you want to go ETH BTC or ETH USD first?
We can actually start with ETH USD.
Let's do it.
So on the monthly time frame, you have I have 2.270.
I fucking got there before you.
Yeah, and I mean that basically we washed out into that pretty much perfectly.
I fucking hate ETH monthly, Don. You know my feelings about this.
Yeah, I don't like it either. It just looks shit. Looks horrendous. But I mean, like you look at this, and to me, this kind of looks like the line in the sand. You start losing like 2K, and you go back in the ones.
Ooh.
It just looks like it's over for ETH, and so that's kind of like the line in the sand. This is why I've been like looking for ETH stuff, just because like if there's one thing that I've learned in crypto is like if you have like a level that if like a proper level, like not just if this 5-minute level is lost, it's lights out, but if there's a level that is actually really good, that kind of prevents the market from going to zero. That's usually what you want to bid, right? Like that's usually the area where you want to actually like look for something, because either you're going to be right, and most of the time you will be, or you're going to be so wrong that at least you're not going to have to go through pain, right? At least you're going to be wrong in one day and then you're going to be out of the trade, and then you're going to cry for it for a while, but you're not stuck in a trade for like 5 months where it chops around your entry and you're just losing your mind. So like that's really like I think like the 2K level, like just like I mean this is 2.2, 2.3, but just generally the 2K area that needs to hold for ETH to look somewhat decent. But I'm in the same boat. I don't like the monthly too much, so we can skip to the weekly. And the weekly time frame has kind of reached support as well. It's the same kind of area, 2.5, 2.4. Basically the area before we had that massive breakdown in 2022, right? Like the lows.
Yep, got it.
And we closed at those. We had a washout below. I've had that level on the chart for ages, and it's just a new support level, right? And when you consider what price has done the last time we hit a support level, right, which to me was 3K. We spent like a year around 3K, almost half a year, like at that 3K level. So just generally, like even if you're bearish, I think it's probably gonna chop around this level. And if you're bullish, you'd be like, okay, we washed out. Now we're gonna bounce from the level. So like there is support here. Obviously, the chart looks worse than a lot of the other ones. The reason why we reached this far, like deep support, has been because ETH's just been trading shit, right? But at least it's at support. That's why I've been kind of looking for like just generally like bullishness. So I can, because I think the bull market, if this is not an echo bubble, whatever, right? Which I mean, could be, right? Like you could argue like, hey, this whole thing, like this entire run up, just been an echo bubble where it's just been like Bitcoin just barely made a new high, just to fuck people over. Basically, the ETF led to more buying, and then you're saying like, hey, the only reason why we even got that far is because a bunch of new ETF buyers got in, but just generally like this is just the echo of the prior run, and we haven't seen like even close to retail attention that we had last cycle, right? Like it's been a pretty like lonely cycle in the way that we really haven't seen much action anywhere besides Bitcoin and Solana, and everything else just kind of made lower highs, right? So you could make the argument like this whole thing, like this whole price action that we had is just an echo bubble, and we're just gonna like retrace most of it and then maybe find new lows, find new highs at some point later down the line. But I think it's too early to make that argument. And if you're like just generally gonna look for areas where that thesis is wrong, I think this would be the case. Like for ETH, like basically the 2 to 3K area is like a good one, and I don't think the bull run is gonna pass over ETH unless, like I said, it's an echo bubble thing where we're all shit out of luck anyway. Like this shit's gonna like crater to nothing. So yeah, I like the area that ETH USD is on the weekly time frame, and then you go over to ETH BTC, and it's pretty much the same kind of situation. It looks like shit, but it's finally reached support at like 0.043, like that high that we had in January 2021. And like you said, on the monthly time frame, we also tested the support with the washout. So you have the situation where you tested a bunch of supports that haven't been tested before, and
First
you have
test, best test, baby.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the first time you want to buy it, if we bounce for a couple of weeks and then come back, we can start making the whole argument that the support's shit and price action's been garbage. But for the first test, I really wouldn't want to be too bearish in these levels, like into these levels. Now, obviously, like if Bitcoin fucks off, and I mean, like I said, the weekly is really ugly. If Bitcoin fucks off, all of this is gonna get run over, and we're gonna test like way lower levels on ETH. So it's basically like I think ETH is the better trade if you think Bitcoin is gonna bottom around here, and if you don't think so, then you want to buy the next washout on ETH, I think, which would be. I mean, even, like I'm starting to struggle to find levels where that would be, right? Like when
on the
you look
USD side.
Yeah, on the USD side, like what the fuck do you buy? Like 1.9K, that's pretty damn close to where we already went. That's
Don,
the
you know what I'm
nearest
gonna say, right? 1936, baby. Remember that level?
Oh shit! But I mean, that's exactly the level I'm talking about. Yeah, like that's the nearest support.
That's a
that
Casual
point.
Friday classic. That's like in the Hall of Fame for levels.
Yeah, that was so painful for so long.
That was fucking rough, but it worked.
I mean, it was perfect level. Yeah, like I still have it on my chart. Like you can count the times to make you money if you traded it.
Mate,
but
the failed breakout reclaim as a bullish setup.
Yeah,
I loved memeing that shit though. We were always like, dude, it looks so bad, but the upside is if it stops looking bad, it'll look so good. That's fucking exactly how it played out. It's quite funny.
Yeah.
Like you can always apply that logic to extreme levels, and it's quite funny. Whenever you get like a really big breakout or a really big breakdown, you should take it at face value, like, hey, this is fucking awesome. But, you know, that little voice in your head, if that fails, then just switch bias aggressively and immediately.
Yeah.
So on the ETH side, obviously the close was at the 2500 level that you like. I mean, that's just a really good level in general. It was that floor beforehand, and then it was the last resistance before we pretty much made the highest high. I'm wondering if that starts to wick backfill and trade back down, would you be willing to scoop some up, at least with like a weekly close invalidation? So, you know, if during the week it starts trading back towards, let's say, the local range low at 2200-ish, and it's sort of filling in that wick, would you buy that and then have an argument that, like, you know, it has to close above 2500, and this is, you know, for that setup to make sense? Is there any world in which we start trading below the 2500 inflection point and you still give this thing a chance, or are you much more strict with this and backfills are only a BTC luxury that you'd be willing to entertain?
Yeah, and this is like where it gets a little bit confusing, because if I look at this weekly chart and I'm like, this current weekly turns red, right, and starts trading lower, and makes a wick, like it starts looking really fucking ugly.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So like I look at on Bitcoin and I'm like, oh yeah, this could backfill and would still look good. On ETH, it's kind of like, if this would backfill, it starts looking really shit really fast. So like I wouldn't want to see it necessarily this week. Maybe like in 2 or 3 weeks, like maybe it bounces here a little bit, shows a little bit of strength, and then backfills like in 2 or 3 weeks. Then I'd be a little bit more inclined to believe that that's a decent one. But if you backfill immediately, right, it starts getting really dangerous, because maybe that bounce is just a liquid bounce that doesn't really mean anything.
Yes.
So yeah, like, and that's the pain with where the market is right now, right? Like it's so complicated. Like there's like a bunch of shit that basically disagrees with each other. We have like technically, at least to my system, I look at ETH and I have a bullish setup on ETH USD and ETH BTC, pretty much the same level. And then I look at Bitcoin, which is like on the same time frame, and I have a very bearish setup. And I fucking hate that. Like it's so
Time to
difficult.
trade ETH BTC, Don, eh?
Yeah, I mean that's.
But also, that's not been helpful, right? Like for the last, I don't know how long it's been, the market just gets punished whenever ETH outperforms.
Yeah,
almost as like a rule of thumb.
Yeah, but I think I generally think that's gonna end. The reason why I'm looking at ETH, right? Like a bunch of people basically ask me, like, "Hey, like, why are you wasting your time with ETH?" I mean, ETH has an ETF now, right? And we had a bunch of outflows, obviously, and we talked about this before, right? I think we're both on team, like, hey, there's probably gonna be a bunch of outflows that is gonna make price action quite shit, right? Before it happened on the ETH ETF.
I fucking hope so anyway.
Yeah, and we got that, right? Like we got a bunch of outflows, and people are disregarding the ETF entirely now on the ETH front. And I think that's a mistake, because I mean, we've seen what the ETF did to Bitcoin, right? And I maintain the belief that without the ETF, we'd still be trading at like 40, 50K at best. And I think, I mean, we had the same situation with Bitcoin, right? Where we got a bunch of like people leaving GBTC, and now we had a bunch of people like flowing out of ETH, because a bunch of people did the arbitrage trade. They were betting on the ETF getting through, and you could buy like all of that stuff at a discount, right? Like the GBTC was a massive discount. ETH was even at a bigger one. And then you have a bunch of people that don't really care about ETH them like itself. They're caring about the arb trade, and they're obviously going to have to go, right? Because the arb trade is over, and you're not necessarily, like, if you're an arb trader, you're not going to stick around to be like, I mean, some of them might, but a lot of people will be just like, okay, fuck this. Like I took the money, the free money. I don't need to roll that money into an ETH position. I'm just going to look for the next arb trade that I can find. And I think we got a lot of that outflow. And ETH is basically in the same situation Bitcoin was. It's just that the market is less bullish now than it was before. But if the market turns back bullish, I think ETH's going to be like could just start running and actually surprise people. And that's why I'm looking for like any kind of like good price action on ETH. And that's why I'm looking at these weekly supports and like I'm actually interested.
Well, yeah, you got a first test, best test, washout, right?
Yeah, like we got a washout first test. Yeah, we got a washout. We got a first test of a good level. We got an ETF. The only thing that really is needed is that Bitcoin doesn't fucking die.
Yes.
And that seems like a tall ask right now, given how it's been trading, right? Like it's been trading like shit. But if that maintains, like if Bitcoin actually is able to hold, I think ETH just seems like a decent bet. And I'm not saying like ETH's going to be a better bet than other stuff, right? Like there might be other stuff around, like maybe Solana outperforms ETH again. Yes. Solana's been like a funny situation where every time people add me for like, they're like, haha, Don, you were bearish like Solana like 6 months ago. Every time it nukes. And every time like...
You have a free sentiment indicator. That's crazy.
Yeah, like legit. So that's been helpful actually.
I bet.
On the trading side, it's been quite funny. But yeah, I actually just think that's a decent setup. Like you have a bunch of things that could play in your favor. It's just you need the market not to disappear. It's the only thing you need, which makes, I think, on the bullish side, like if you're bull, makes ETH like a decent place to look.
It's interesting the
That's why
comment
I'm
you
looking
made
there.
about the backfills being contextually different, sort of what the chart would look like on the BTC front if it were to backfill versus on ETH if it were to backfill. I'm guessing if it were to do that, at least for ETH, it can't, kind of the threshold for it is higher, right? Like it can backfill a little bit to sort of retest the 2500 level, but it can't go too deep because then it'll be sub 2500 and just looks a bit shit. So that would mean you'd probably have to go to the daily or even 4 hour and look for a higher low below 2500 as the sort of maximum permissible backfill without the chart looking shit. If it does that, and then go from there. Or ideally just like no fucking backfill and the level holds, right? Because we did overshoot it by quite a fucking bit on the 2500 front. The only other question I have is with regard to ETH USD is the underside retest of the previous range, 2900, 3K, etc. If we were to go up there, is that a resistance in your mind? Is it one of those we're back there too quickly? It's actually a sign of strength. If someone doesn't want to play backfill games, would you plausibly long a reclaim of that as its own setup? Like
long into the resistance.
I mean, hey, that's a Don classic, right? They make me sound absurd.
No, I actually don't even hate it. Like longing into that resistance, I actually don't hate it. I mean, you're gonna be right or wrong really fucking fast.
You long the resistance and then it backfills.
Pain. No, but I actually don't mind it. Like a reclaim of the resistance, I don't mind. The thing is, I think if we do get that, you're probably gonna, like, let's say this reclaims 2.9k. The daily close candle that you're gonna get is gonna be at 3.2 or 3.3. In my opinion. So you're basically gonna have to forego a 10% candle if you want to buy like the confirmed reclaim, which you would try to front run by buying into the resistance, but then you're buying into resistance, like the most obvious resistance ever. So it's kind of like that situation where you get a worse entry. Like if you buy 3.2 or whatever, like the moment you get the confirmation that we're actually back above 2.9, you get a worse entry, but you forego the odds that you're actually just that you're just wrong. But yeah, I think that's not bad. Like a reclaim of 2.9 is not bad. And at the end of the day, if you're buying 3.2k, I think a lot of people would love to have a 3.2k entry. I think they're having a much worse entry already, like 3.1, 3.2. I think a bunch of people have a much worse entry on ETH because
that's very fair. Yeah,
like it's been ranging for so long and it's been like having like really terrible price action. So I think you're not in the, like there's a bunch of people that have worse entries than you, even if you buy the confirmation.
Oh yeah, most of the volume traded has been sort of breakout chasing or chasing strength one form or another. So that average, whatever that point of control looks like, if I were to throw up a volume profile, like realistically for the average person's entry, it's probably not great. A lot of it's just kind of been one day where ETH BTC is up, chase that. ETH USD, big day, chase that. And, it's just been mean reverting the entire time.
And one thing that I will say is that I think if we reclaim 3K, we're going to make a new all-time high on ETH.
Oh, okay. Nice. Wow, that's, like, well, then you shouldn't care if it's 3K or 3,200 or buying the local top if that's
why
view,
I'm
right?
like saying, like, it's just that if it reclaims 3K, like if it closes at 3.3 and then goes back to 3K, like a lot of people would already be stopped out again.
That leverage.
Yeah. So like if you're not using leverage, I think that's a decent play. If you're using leverage, I mean, you're gonna have to make do with something else.
Yeah, as is often the case.
Yeah.
Yeah, fine. I think that's fairly thorough for the ETH side. I need to turn my AC on. In the meantime, Don, for the 5-second break, I'm gonna put on the Solana weekly chart, and you tell the audience where it hurt you.
Dude, like the Solana situation is like, it's such a weird one because like, and this is another one where I'm like, it's conflicting again. Like I have like ETH at support, and technically you could argue that Solana's at support too. But just like this has been like, this range low has been tested too many times, right? For me to be comfortable with it. Like 135, like that area is just fucking like, it's just terrible. Like, I hate like second test, third test, fourth test, fifth test. Like, what the fuck are you doing? You know, like, yes, this is technically it's better than ETH because it didn't have a market structure break,
Sure.
right? But just looking at it, like, it's so hard to buy 135 again, right? Just
I mean, hey, the market doesn't seem to find it that difficult, Don.
no, I mean the market doesn't. I mean, I like to be entirely fair. Like, I mean, I've been short biased the range, right? Like, I shorted 160, 170, I think, the first time around. Then it nuked, and I managed to close lower. Then I shorted like 180, 183, like on before the big red candle, and I actually just closed it like 15% into that move. Like, I closed it at like 160. So I captured $20 and could have captured like almost 100.
You're fucking crying in my WhatsApp DMs about that trade, Don.
I mean, that was sad. I also had like decent size on it. Like,
Yeah.
this was like not like this because I was like, I have such high confidence that that's gonna play. And then I had decent size on it, and it nuked from 180 to 160, and then I was like, I just have other things in life to do, so I'm just gonna close it. It's gonna bounce again, and then I can just get the bounce, short it again, like, and then I walk away and I come back, and it's basically trading at like, it's trading at 150, 140, 130, 120, and I'm like, fuck. But yeah, this kind of like I don't like it. I think if my feeling on ETH is correct, obviously Solana is gonna bounce. So like, that's that. But I like, and this is what makes it so hard for me to take like massive conviction bets and big sizes, because for me this is a bearish chart. Like, I look at Solana and this is probably gonna break down, and I look at ETH and I'm like, this is probably gonna go up, and both of those things is not gonna happen, right? Like, as much as the ETH heads would like to have it, I do not think there's a world in which Solana breaks this range to the downside and Solana and ETH goes
Like
up.
a full decoupling type of move.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I just don't believe in it, right? So one of those is wrong, and it could very well be that like I'm like overly cautious on this Solana support at 135. It's just it's a setup that I would never take, right? Like, I see this, it makes lower high, like it made a lower high. It's tested that level 3 times on like a weekly basis. Like, I just don't
I
like
mean,
it.
look at the daily. The range low that I've had for a while is 125.
Yeah.
And if you were to just to count the number of wicks on that, just like one, just big swing touches, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we had a fifth one.
Yeah.
Like 5 tests of the same range low. Now, of course, there's a world in which this is just like a sideways reaccumulation type of thing, and the entire thing is just a really prolonged range, time-based capitulation that takes your money. You're waiting for it to break down, it never does, and then just fucking shoots off. Completely possible. But then the counter argument to that is obviously that this is just a support that's getting beaten up. It's getting defended absolutely viciously, and then once those defenders, if you will, fold, that's when you get like a really big high time frame move.
Yeah, oh yeah, and then like, if this fails basically, and this is the reason why I'm so cautious, right, on the Solana front. It's not necessarily because it has to fail, but if it fails,
Yes.
I think if you go below 100, you're gonna go to 70 straight up, like,
Ooh, dude.
probably like in one candle. Like,
Come
I could see
on.
that being a daily candle, like you go from 100 to 70.
Jesus, man, what's wrong with you?
But also, like, I mean, it's been held, like it's held, right? And maybe, and this could be the case, right? And this could be like, just like, there's a bunch of ginormous like the wallets, like people, whatever, they have deep pockets that want to make the narrative play. Because I mean, let's be real, Solana has been dominating the cycle, like on all fronts, right? The meme front, the price action front, on Solana itself, right? Like, everything on Solana or around Solana has just kind of done the best. So maybe this is just like someone just scooping up everything, which could be, right? Like, if you have deep enough wallets to buy, like a wallet to buy everything below 125, and then you just like keep doing that long enough until the entire market turns around, right? Like, everything is in a bear market and someone just buys up all the Solana. That's possible. It's just from a setup perspective, it's so hard to buy.
That's the thing, right? Like people take setup criteria as sort of ideological positions. Like, oh, I can't buy something, or like my system doesn't cater for setups where a support has been tested fucking 6 times in a row, and people will be like, oh, well then you're bearish Solana. It's like, well, no, those two things are different. Like, you can be bullish, but say that I don't have a setup that would allow me to risk my own capital at this specific level at this specific juncture, right?
Yeah.
Like, I can be bullish and want to buy like a 125 proper breakdown. I could be bullish and want to buy like a range high breakout 180 plus and hope it's not the pico top. But like, just, sometimes you just have to decide where you're not going to do business. And at least for me, and I know this is generally the case for you as well, if something's been tested, for me it tends to be like more than 3 times, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like more than 3 high time frame swing touches, I'm like, the risk profile of the trade basically changes with every consecutive test of the same support in a reasonably short time frame, right? Yep. You can just think that, apply the first test, best test logic to that. Like, the risk profile of the trade on the first test, best test is like, holy shit, this is like a great opportunity. Like, even if I'm wrong, I'll be wrong quickly. Even if I'm wrong, there's a decent chance there's a bounce that lets me out first. And then if I'm right, this is one of the best times to bet on it, right? Yep. And then the second test, it gets slightly worse, where you're like, okay, we're back here, but a lot of the time the market just kind of backfills or refills or retests. The second test isn't that scary. It's a slightly different risk profile, but still comparable to the first one. And on the third one, it changes once again. Where it's like, okay, it's starting to become a bit gloomy. Like, why are we back here? What pushed the market further? You have to investigate, is it just like a bunch of shorting? Is it like a correlated pullback into a strong support? And, kind of have to dig a little bit. But then the further it goes, not only can you come up with fewer good bullish justifications to the market revisiting the same level over and over again, but the long tail on the risk side of what happens if I'm wrong, like, massively increases. Like, if you compare the first test, best test, what happens if I'm wrong? The answer is like, it's probably not going to be the end of the world, right? There might be some sort of reaction. There might be some sort of bounce that lets you out. It's probably not going to fold completely if the support is good. And so if you're wrong, the losses are manageable. But if you're wrong on the 6th test versus the first one, then all of those, hey, maybe I'll be able to get a decent exit, yada, yada, that fucking goes out the window. And suddenly the losses by far overshadow the potential reward type of thing, or at least become so big, the risks become so large that whatever upside bounce that you had planned just kind of isn't worth it, right? Like 6K BTC breakdown is the finest example of that, I think. Yeah. But yeah, I agree. Like 125 Sol, someone's obviously very, very much defending it. In crypto, it can work, especially because, as you mentioned, Solana's been narrative dominant and price dominant, and the Sol people are very rich at this point. If you're those big wallets or sort of big ecosystem funds players, etc., you've definitely got the capital for it. But in general, I fucking hate price floors and price pegs and seeing specific levels get defended very viciously and sort of price and market condition agnostic execution into levels kind of protect at all costs. I fucking hate that shit. It works maybe 2 times out of 10.
Yeah,
if that.
I mean, the problem is when it goes wrong, it goes horrifically wrong.
Yeah. When it goes wrong, it goes horrifically wrong. So that's Sol. I think for trading, it's good. For relative pair trading, is good. It just has to be away from the fucking 125 level. I even made the meme last time on the last Casual Friday where I'm like, when it bounces, I'm like, oh, I'm such a fucking idiot. I should have just bought the support. Fuck my rules. And then it retraces. I'm like, let's fucking go. I'm like, I'm a genius. And that pretty much exactly played out, right? Like, it went back to, and I mean, even if you were, I think most traders who were rebuying the 125 daily support, they got liquidated. On that 5th of August move. Like, it went down to what, on Binance at least, that was a low of 110. So just, I mean, even if you go purely on, that's like, exactly, 12% move. Like, most of the TA-oriented leverage, type of guys are getting wiped out on that. Most kind of guys who are like stop below the low at 125, they're getting wiped out on that. So, I mean, that's a proper washout. So even if you get it right, that 125 is going to hold, at a certain point, the execution around that level and the wicks become so sloppy that you can be right in theory, but still lose money and be wrong in practice. So, like, fuck those types of levels. That's at least my framework for why I don't like them.
Yeah. And for me, the problem with this whole situation, like I said, is that, like, you get conflicting signals here. Like, Solana looks bad, ETH looks somewhat okay. It's been the other way around the entire cycle. Now, is this an argument for or against, like, the ETH position? I don't fucking know. And then I'm just kind of like it's the same struggle, right? Like, you look at Bitcoin on the weekly time frame, that's clearly bad. You look on Solana USD, to me at least, that's dangerous. Not necessarily bad, but dangerous. And then you look at ETH and you're like, okay, should I really bet on this? And that's why like I would be much more bullish if I didn't have those situations.
Yes. Dude, the amount of conflict is actually fucking insane if you think about it, right?
Yeah.
Like BTC monthly still looks good. That hasn't done anything. Weekly looks shit. Daily has a local support, but there's the risk of the backfill as well.
Yeah.
Then ETH, BTC, it's been shit the whole time, but finally hit a first test, best test support, as did ETH USD. So that's an argument for a bounce. However, also in general, ETH strength for the past year has been shitty. On the Sol front, I mean, Sol ETH still looks strong. Sol weekly is like a wash at best. Sol daily is still holding, but that's just like another test, which further pushes out the tail risk of if you bet and you get it wrong. And then you have legacy correlation stuff to think about
Yeah.
as well, where we've had like a shit, there's been a huge bounce post yen trade, supposed blow up in the S&P and in the NASDAQ, but crypto is weak. So like, not only do these instruments conflict with each other, but certain time frames within those instruments conflict with each other, and then fucking macro just throws another item into the kitchen sink as if that weren't enough. Like it is, it might sound like we're exaggerating with this conflicting signals, whatever type of shit, but it really is. And I think in those cases, you either just have to pick one and be like, it's never going to be perfect. There's always going to be conflicting signals, although I don't think to this extent, but whatever. There are always going to be conflicting signals. Fuck it. I'm just going to bet on this thing because I've got the clearest invalidation, highest conviction. Balls on the table, as you said, and Godspeed to you. Or alternatively, you're like, yo, fuck this. Nothing sort of makes sense at the moment, and it's all different time frames, different assets, supports, resistances, market structure. Fuck it. I'm just going to wait. And I think that's equally plausible. But I think you kind of need to pick an extreme. Right? You either
have to be extreme at it. Because if you flip flop like even a little bit, you're gonna get fucked.
That's been the story of the market as a whole, right? So yeah, I think that makes sense. Kind of have to be, if you're gonna bet, you have to be a high conviction extremist, and then if you don't have that ability, especially to hold through chop once you make that bet, then just fuck off basically and ignore it and do something else.
Yep.
Are there any altcoins they want to talk about? I mean, I've got the S&P. Somewhere, and that's not really an altcoin, but it's sort of, I mean, look at this thing, look at the fucking bounce on this thing. It's terrifying. Insane. Like from the lows, that is mental. It's back, it's just retraced the entire fucking dump, and look at crypto.
It did. And I mean, that's the relative weakness we have compared to the stock market, which is also like another like bearish sign, right? Like that's not good. But then you can also be like, hey, we've had this before where we've been weak and then suddenly like it gets retraced like immediately. As in like this, we had this basically on the last low, right, where the S&P was quite good, and then and Bitcoin just traded like shit, and then it bounced from 54 to 69k in no time, while the S&P didn't do anything. So we're like, it's all a little bit confusing. It's all a little bit like hard to
have fun with
tell.
That one, right?
And I mean, saying where the S&P is gonna go is also so fucking hard, no? Like to me at least. Like I mean, it looks like obviously like just generally up is probably the right answer, but like just generally like week to week, so hard to say. Like it's gonna be up 10%, down 10%, like. Specific stocks are going to be up and down 50% just in like intraday. Like the world is all over the place right now. And I mean, you kind of have to expect crypto to act somewhat similar, right? Like that's why we've been chopping a bunch, because I mean, Nvidia is just like moving like crazy. You have Intel moving like I mean, I could pick any stock, right? And you look at it and you're like, what the fuck? Funnily enough, the only one that isn't really moving is GME.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I forgot that thing existed. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone should forget this thing exists, but.
Oh yeah, mate. We've got quite a hodgepodge, a cauldron of conflicting signals on our hands. Anything on the altcoin front catch your eye? Because a lot of the time, at least the prevailing wisdom used to be like, oh, majors are chopping, just trade alts with their own invalidation, etc. I've never in my life found that argument to be convincing. No. I think most of it's been cope and people being fooled by randomness and kind of short-term variance, and it really hasn't been the case for that long that there's just a regime called chop and you can do whatever you want with altcoins as a whole. I think that's been invalidated because the chop has been pretty volatile and that drags the market, first of all, and second of all, the dispersion in price action returns among altcoins has been such that you can't really justify a blanket approach being like, oh, time for alt world, essentially. That's been one of the most expensive mistakes to make this cycle. I mean, WIF you tweeted about, right?
Yeah. I mean, I tweeted about it. People were making fun of it as like our bottom signal, right? And I tweeted about it like making like a lower high at 1.8 something.
Okay.
I mean, that's at 1.4 now. There's another like 20% down. Great. I mean, the whole meme thing, and I really feel like that has been vindicated. I've had a bunch of people tell me that I was just wrong on it. I just don't see it. Like I tweeted it, the entire market just basically went to zero in my eyes.
Also,
like,
you told me to buy Popcat, if you recall, and my net worth is negative now. So
yeah,
if we can sort that out after this show, that'd be great. If you could just stay on.
Did we not talk about it at 0.5 something?
No, dude, it was like the weekly support.
I mean, I never
0.6, and you said, "Go all in, buddy. I got you." That's a quote.
I claim that is not the truth.
Actually, look, it did go from 0.6, the support I outlined, all the way to 0.24. But obviously, because I'm an experienced god trader, I waited for the retest all the way back at 0.6 and got out at break even. Thanks for playing.
I mean, easy, no? Like,
Study trade management. Obviously, I didn't fucking buy this shit, but I mean, again, that's a awesome sort of data point for the washout argument, right? Like, no one's fucking surviving that move if they're holding from the highs or holding the retest of like 60% down in 4 days or something.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised it bounced that high. Like, I'm a little bit shocked that it went from 0.25.
Are you buying the wick?
No, I mean, you're not
gonna
get me to buy any meme coins. The same that I said last show.
Okay, what about Pepe? Can I get you to buy Pepe?
No, just turn on the weekly chart.
Yeah, the weekly is a scam for sure.
I mean, that just looks fucking awful. And I mean, like, that it's gonna look much better if it reclaims.
Like 900, 880 or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. But like right now, this just looks like complete and utter garbage. And you look at WIF and that looks bad, and you look at like all the other meme coins, they all look bad. And I mean, like, that really shouldn't surprise anyone. Like, I'm shocked that my argument that memes were like oversaturated got so much heat. Just look at this shit. Like, there's infinite amounts of these. Like,
and this is all centralized exchange ones. These are supposedly
these are the ones that held up the best. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like because people were like, hey, you were wrong. Like, this and that coin did well. Like, Popcat did well, for example. After, I think Popcat is like down like only like a couple, like 10-20% since I said like memes are gonna die, which is really like not that much, right? But that's the best one out of them, like, or like 1 out of 5 that might not be down since. Like Pepe is also traded quite well, and that's down. WIF is down like horrendously. And then you look on chain, the ones that never made it to the centralized exchange, and they're all at zero.
Yeah, like, people hate pump fun. So we'll discuss briefly in the news section. Like, it's that bad. Although MOG, how's that done? How about, are you going to tell me to buy MOG now? MOG.
Is that even? I don't even know.
I mean, it's on. I think it's on Bybit and BitGet.
I mean, it looks like MOG got mogged. Like, that's down 50%.
Yeah. Okay, but what if it wick backfills to zero?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's tough, and I'm not surprised on the meme front. Like, if you don't have new people coming into the market, who the fuck is gonna buy this shit? Like, it's not like you're gonna get any funds, any ETFs for this. This is just like crypto participants.
I mean, they're also trapped in the middle. Sorry, just like very quickly on the same exact point. Like, people want new shitter type of stuff because that's where they think there's the most upside. And if you get to this point where you're in centralized exchange territory, but your price action is shit, I mean, you kind of lose everyone, right? Because you're too late to be like super early compared to what, relative to the returns people want and the speed of those returns. And I mean, you're on a centralized exchange at that point, and you're being compared to like BTC and Solana and ETH and all this other stuff. And it's pretty hard to do business, at least for the average participant. I feel like the whole allure of meme coins was that you can be early and make money quickly. And by definition, if you're on a centralized exchange, that probability kind of goes down, or at least the time frames expand if you're being generous. If you're being less generous, it's like, well, they get on a centralized exchange and the shit's dead.
Yeah, I mean, that's where you distribute, right? Like,
yes.
That's what, and I mean, this is unironically what people talk about in these chats too, right? They're like, hey, let's wait for this and that listing, and then we can fucking dump into them.
Yeah. Dude, the trenches are absolutely cerebral now. Like,
yeah. And it's hilarious because people are always like, yeah, you just don't get it. And then you look on pump.fun, like you said, that like we're going to talk about in a sec on the Twitter, and people fucking hate them.
Yes.
Like I'd be afraid to walk on the streets with these kind of comments.
Yeah, full 180, dude.
And I mean, that's the trenches, right? Like,
yeah.
you know, people got wrecked, people lost everything, which makes sense. Like I made a tweet about the trenches and like how the people that are sent into trenches, like those are the ones that get murdered brutally, right?
Yeah, that's true. The cannon fodder, basically.
Yeah, it's the cannon fodder. And people are like, yeah, we know. But then, I mean, if you knew, right? Like if you knew, why the fuck did you send everyone there?
Yes.
Like I had a bunch of people that basically promoted the trenches, being like, hey, we know that this is like, and I'm like, yeah, but I mean, you're not sending anyone, like you shouldn't be sending anyone in the trenches, right? If you don't absolutely have to.
Yes.
But apparently, that's just how it is, right? Like you send people in the trenches that so your trench life gets better, not their life.
Back home by Christmas, eh?
Yep.
Also, the funny, like one thing to bear in mind is that while I can understand if someone disagreed with you about your meme coin comments when it came to timing, like I get that. You can have reasonable disagreement with you based on timing and not come across as detached from the real world or making too many assumptions. The part that I always found difficult, and I've articulated on this show, was people fundamentally disagreeing that meme coins are just the hot version of altcoins, and as a result they are overwhelmingly likely to follow similar patterns, similar cycle as they have since 2013, essentially, which is that you have hot shit goes up, insiders get rich, they distribute, retail buys the top, then it fucking nukes and something else takes up the attention. Like the amount of evidence you need, or like the super strong theoretical argument you need to overcome that 10 plus year almost law of physics in crypto is so insanely high, and people just sort of disregarded it completely. Like in their mind, they just categorized meme coins as this entirely new asset class that would somehow be immune to these market mechanics and market cycles and psychology. Yeah, like study NFTs, right? Study OpenSea. I think those are actually, I mean, people are going to say, oh, the NFTs are so different, all this type of stuff, but I actually disagree. I think structurally you can make very good comparisons between like Pump.Fun and OpenSea eventually, and meme coins and most meme coins and NFTs eventually, because they both fit the same profile of what happens to the new shiny tail end of the risk curve, high profile public facing stuff when the tides shift or when people get bored. And the answer is they fucking die because people move on to something else. And that should be your baseline assumption, I feel like, as opposed to making exceptions to the rule and saying, oh, well, this is different, that is different. That's the part that I found puzzling. Like, disagreeing with you about timing, fine. Like, it's a market, right? Whatever. That can, you know, if BTC went up to fucking all-time highs, they, as it has done many times, it would have bailed out a bunch of meme coins and a bunch of altcoins as it did on the way up and sort of negated or nullified the froth signals. That's reasonable. What was always far more unreasonable is that we've invented some sort of new fucking asset class that's just going to be fundamentally different, even though it's just like something you fucking trade, you know? I don't have any other altcoins I want to talk about after you liquidated me on Popcat. I think the story of the moment. I mean, did you look at Sui, the influencer hashtag Grant? Coin that was interesting. Big wick, but it also shows, I think, how narrative starved the market is at the moment. I mean, if people are willing to pump random layer ones based on influencer tweets at this point that have huge unlocks coming, I mean, Jesus Christ, you know, I don't mind a return to tradition on the centralized exchange side of things, but if if this is what it looks like, you know, it's like two bad choices: either pump and dump centralized exchange stuff that just bleeds out, or trenches where everyone loses money. Like, can I just say no?
Yeah, the cabal has to stop doing this, otherwise people are just gonna leave crypto forever.
Agreed.
Like, I mean, if you lose money, if you go like trade the hottest pump fund because people are promising you that's where you're gonna make money, and then you go on the centralized exchanges and you get mistreated like that, fucking hell.
I mean, in the past, even if you ended up losing your money, like if you were involved in crypto at any time in the bull market, it's overwhelmingly that you made money for at least some period of time, right?
Yeah, at least you had like the millions that you could regret after.
Yes, exactly. You had the trauma or whatever, but at least there was like a proof of concept, right? Like, okay, if I weren't a fucking idiot, there's a way to make money here, and I had that money, but my own mismanagement and mistakes lost it, right? And that kind of keeps you in the game, even if you get fucked over, because that alluring prospect of, what if I did sell? What if I did realize my gains? That kind of stays with you. But if this shit keeps moving at the current pace that it is, where you never make any money, you just show up, get rugged, and your portfolio is gone, or you have like a fucking day to make money on your new shitter, and then it just goes to fucking zero, and you never sort of have a sense that there's a scalable, plausible strategy here, then, I mean, it's really hard to come back from that. You know,
100% agree. I mean, it's just fucking brutal.
Yeah, it is. It's fucking brutal. I think this is a good segue to open up some of these articles. I also just want to let me just open up a few. I'm not going to try to make this not too long, but we can actually start with the funding one. Do you know BTC funding is negative on most lenders, which is kind of weird.
It's wild.
Yeah,
that's what I'm talking about. Like, and I mean, I didn't even really look at it, and I could tell that sentiment is really bad.
Yeah.
And when you include funding, you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah,
like
that's interesting to me, because a lot of the time when you see, funding is negative, it's right after a huge nuke, where because of all the liquidations and forced sellers, the perp gets pushed way below the index, driven by those liquidations, and then funding, which is just a derivative of perp price relative to index price, is negative, and people are like, oh look, everyone's shorting the bottom. It's like, no, that's not what's happening. Funding is negative because the perp is lower, because people got fucking liquidated. They're not shorting the bottom. And oftentimes when that kind of stuff happens, once liquidity returns and conditions normalize, the perp starts trading reasonably back in line with the index, and funding normalizes. So immediately after a liquidation event, I never put too much weight in funding, because I know it's just the perp being pushed around by liquidations. It's the kind of consolidation, liquidity returning period in the market post liquidation, where I sort of look at, okay, now that things are sort of returning back to normal, how are people positioned post mega candle up or mega candle down? I think sort of enough time has passed to make that assessment, at least in the short term. I'm pretty surprised that funding is negative at the moment, and that would suggest that there is at least some spot buying, or the perps are still sort of unreasonably bearish. Maybe on Monday markets, I'll take a closer look at like the changes in open interest and try to get a feel as to sort of which side is pushing this more. Is it just perps being horny, or is it spot coming in and buying? Need to look at some other indicators as well, like spot book depth, etc. I mean, at the moment, open interest has been marching up, and there's still a decent sized discount on the perps relative to the index. Now that can just even out without anything fantastic happening, but I'd be pretty curious to eventually, at least maybe on Monday, take a deeper look and talk about it. It's never as simple as negative funding equals bullish and whatever positive funding equals bearish. It's never like that. But contextually, you can kind of get hints when there's a divergence between price action and funding rates and who's being aggressive, so on and so forth. Just something to keep an eye on.
The only thing is that maybe someone knows something. That's like the wrong risk. Like when you're like, I mean, there's more than just one risk, but like a lot of people are just like, funding is super positive, so I'm going to short, and funding super negative, I'm going to long. And then you're like, yeah, but maybe there's someone that actually has some more information than you, that's sitting in the order book being like, hey, I'm going to make so much money on this shit that I can eat like a few negative funding rounds.
Yes. Adam Cochran is not a gambler. I fucking love that meme. It's so good.
Oh god.
If you want a futures funding open interest kind of breakdown on Monday, leave me a comment please, and I'll get around to it. We can look at quarterly basis, we can look at what happened around the lows, we can look at book depth to see if it's spot pushing versus perp selling, we can look at all that type of stuff. And also in my pinned tweet, there's a master. So I say master not because it's any form of mastery, just because it has a bunch of shit in it about open interest funding and all that stuff put together. So you can go read up on that before Monday if you're interested. Also, leave a like on this video and all this other shit. So yeah, that's the futures side of things. So this is the Pump Fun tweet that I have, and it's from Bastille BTC, who doesn't follow me, so he's an enemy for life, obviously. I'm joking. He says, Pump Fun gambling is legit the worst odds out of any gambling game. Better to just go to the casino, lol. 1.4% of tokens go to Ray. Now, there's obviously some nuance to this, where, you know, for example, Wide Lady tweeted that, yeah, here's the thing, though, it's pretty easy to tell what has potential and what is garbage on there. You still run the risk of rug, but if you're just trying to flip 1 to 3 sol real quick, it's not too hard to do it. The stats are a bit misleading. Like, yeah, I guess you could have like a mental version of how likely to be rug versus not, but I don't think it justifies a 1.4% get bonded and go to radium type of number. I mean, that's just, those are fucking miserable odds.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's explained almost entirely by the sort of professionalization of launching and pump and dumping tokens on Pump Fun, where the initial conception was, hey, this is where I can be early to new projects, new communities, cults, and actually ride something, and the next whiff is there, and the next bonk is there, the next XYZ is there, and I just have to like take a risk and hold, and maybe one of them, you know, almost like venture style, will grow and blow up. And that, in a very short period of time, has transformed into, okay, we just need to like, we don't even need to get to radium. If we do, this is like the market cap resistance, and then you sort of get rid of it as quickly as possible and rotate to something else. It's just become a fucking professionalized extraction venue, it feels like. And there's a ton of like bot activity now. There's a bunch of like insidery cabal type behavior now, a bunch of sniping, bundling. Like it's a fucking shit show. And I think, as you mentioned, the sentiment when you look at Pump Fun tweets, I'd love to get like a snapshot of now versus, I don't know, what, 6 months ago, and see the difference. But it's like become professional industrial grade value extraction at this point.
Yeah, that's how crypto does it. Like at the end of the day, like I find it quite funny how people are upset at them now, now that everything went down. Whereas like, I mean, you really like, if you buy these dog shit tokens that have obviously no value, right? Like I'm a little bit shocked that you'd be upset at losing money. If anything, you should be like, hey, I'm just a fucking idiot. Like, why the fuck did I think that buying this was smart? Obviously, it's not great, right? Because the Pump Fund team is getting richer by the minute. So they're kind of incentivized to have this kind of like value extraction going on. But like, I think anyone that's upset at them should be upset at themselves more. Because I mean, if you trade this kind of garbage, I mean, that's always going to be the end result, right? So like, I find it a little bit funny, especially in a place like crypto, where you're kind of supposed to be taking your financial matters into your own hands, to blame like Pump Fund for it. And I say this as someone that fucking hates that, right? Like that whole thing is just like the whole Pump Fund meta. I just hate what it did to crypto, right? But I still think it's a little bit funny to blame them for it, when the person to blame is yourself.
It's like blaming Blur for NFTs.
Yeah, it's just fucking dumb. Like, just not how it works.
Yeah, so that's Pump Fun, and here's a good example of the current meta from the block. Traders dump MAGA meme coins after Trump fails to talk crypto with Elon Musk. That's been like one of the prevailing metas nowadays on Pump Fun, is people take anything Elon tweet related, news related, whatever, just like short-term news events, and create, you know, fucking 50 tokens come up, and you hope to bet on the right one, and it pumps if it's the quote-unquote chosen one in tandem with the news. And then obviously the attention span and the retention on this is less than 1 day in most cases, and then it just
so
fucking
stupid,
goes back down,
man.
like that meta is. And again, it's so fucking insider laden, this type of stuff. Like, how, to whatever extent you think it's insider laden, like, oh, which token is like the one, which one's getting tweeted about, you know, if 10 news tokens come up, which one has the most traction, whatever degree you think it's insider laden, is probably 10 times more insider laden than that at this current point. Like, I don't think there's like a single cabal and that narrative is true, but my understanding is that there are multiple kind of repeat offender type of groups that have good infrastructure, KOLs on payroll, good coordination of tweets and on-chain activity and wallet activity, etc. And again, this is professional industrial grade operation at this point. It's not an organic place to go find new memes and build a community, whatever. You know, it's dollars in, dollars out, onto the next 1 day type of shit.
Yep.
Fun. This article kind of speaks to what we've been discussing with BTC, where everything kind of looks and should be fucking good, being so close to the all-time high and all things considered, but we just keep getting hit over the head with these random, in often cases, ancient fucking supply being dropped on our heads. So nearly $600 million seized in Silk Road Bitcoin sent to Coinbase wallet. So it's like, you know, you've got the Silk Road, you've got GOX, you've got other US related seizures, I'm pretty sure. You've had Germany, you've had like dormant wallets moving, and it's just been a story of almost price insensitive, or maybe price sensitive, but in any case, supply quite readily and voluntarily hitting the market. And I just don't think that's been helping. And it also doesn't help that there isn't like a clear single overhang, if that makes sense. Like, okay, there's this big seller, they're price insensitive, they have this many coins, and they'll be done at this point, and then you can sort of try to price that in and trade around it. It's very much more been the case that we just get hit with this coin moved or this entity got this much BTC and now they're choosing to distribute, etc. And it's been harder to predict, and their behavior also on chain has been harder to predict. If anything, I almost prefer the Germans' approach when it comes to liquidating their crypto. The second part of that sentence is very important, because at least they're like, look, we have this much, it's one wallet, and we're gonna fucking sell it and fuck off, you know? And like that makes it easier to plan around, trade around, price in, and I think it's better for market impact and market transparency versus just like, hey, we're just gonna fucking shuffle around some coins and seize them and send them to Coinbase, and this like opaque obfuscation process where you don't want to buy because there are like n number of entities with a bunch of supply and their sort of liquidation schedule is unclear.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically like, I mean, if you get rid of overhang, that's good. If you don't know if you're getting rid of it, but you're afraid that there's overhang or not, and like basically like it's almost always worse when people know that there's someone else that's gonna be selling than the actual selling itself. You know what I mean? Like when you have a bunch of people just sitting there waiting for selling to be done, so they can buy, or just even selling themselves because they know there's gonna be selling down the line. Like that's almost always gonna lead to worse price action than just the selling itself. It's just something that we've had in crypto for a long time. You have the Mt. Gox thing, and then price goes down 20%, right? And then never, like, we had this FUD like a million times, right, in the last 10 years that Mt. Gox is gonna sell the coins, and price went down a bunch every time, and then it didn't end up selling, and then you actually get selling and you get people getting the coins and price doesn't really move. It's almost always been like that. Whereas like just you spook people out, they are not going to buy or they're going to sell, and that's going to be more selling and less buy pressure than the actual event.
Yeah, it's just another element of uncertainty, right?
Yep.
Fucking classic crypto. Of course these cunts will wake up at the all-time high to dump on our heads.
I mean, it's a good place to dump on people.
I mean, if you're going to do it anywhere, yeah, from their point of view. But yeah, I just prefer your government's approach on this stuff, Don, you know? Just like, hey, we have to nuke it and get it done ASAP type of thing versus fucking waking up asking every day. Also, I've been swearing a lot in the second half. I'm sorry for those listening with young kids, but also just should have better things to do than listen to Casual Friday. Or maybe your kids will learn something. There you go. There's a decent amount of good sentence syntax and vocabulary on this show as well. So
you're from your side.
It's, well, not entirely. So it's break even. This is just like a random point, but it's sort of related to altcoins. Chainlink's data streams and VRF are now live on Base. So I keep seeing every single week Chainlink doing something real material in the real world, right? And then also in terms of DeFi, it essentially runs almost entirely on Chainlink, and like from an Oracle and pricing perspective. And every competitor like Pith or Pyth, whatever it's called, that has tried to replicate Chainlink or for a similar service, just in terms of uptime and reliability, has been a disaster. I think Chainlink is by far the best in class for this type of stuff. But then you look at the actual price action on Chainlink and it's depressing, right? Yeah. Like Link USD is, I mean, back at $10 essentially, had a similar breakdown, is trading at a similar-ish price to the range that it was in like for all of 2022. And then if you look at Link BTC, that's not good. That's been downtrending for a very long time.
Yeah.
If you look at Link against Link against Sol, that's, I mean, you know, I can hear you fucking typing it out. So let's wait for you to get there.
Yeah.
Look at Link Solana, right? And so from like for someone getting into crypto with maybe prior assumptions from legacy markets or just basic logic, this is like very hard to explain to someone, right? It's like, oh, what does Link do? And you're like, oh, it basically like runs all of DeFi, it has a monopoly on oracles and whatever else. And then they look at the price and compare it to like random stuff. I mean, at least with Sol, you can make an argument that it's this cycle's golden child for the casino and whatever else. But even relative to like other tokens, it's just not. There's like a massive divergence between the reputation, the utility, the tech, etc., and then the actual token itself. Yeah, it's like it's kind of the first thing you have to understand, I feel like, or explain to someone when they get into crypto. They're like fundamentals, at least depending on your time frame. Just because the protocol is useful doesn't mean the token price action is.
I mean, that's the thing. Like the token is. I mean, what do you need the token for?
I mean, there's going to be some staking thing, I think.
Like that. Like that's the problem with all of these, right? Like, yes, fundamentally, like when you think about what they're like what some of these protocols do, that's quite cool, right? But what do you actually need the token for? And that's because I think the largest reason why there's such a big divide there is just because of American security laws, right? Like no one wants to run into America and have a problem with them, so they basically make useless tokens. And then at some point, people realize that these tokens don't do anything. And I mean, I'm not commenting directly on Link. I'm not an expert on Link and its token, but for most of the stuff, and I'm assuming Link is the same, but could be different. Like I said, I don't want to get into a fight with the Linkies again. It's just there's a big divide there. Like basically you can have the token and it can be the most useful protocol in the world, but I mean, if there's no connection there, right, it's pretty hard to make a good argument for it. Yes. And at the end of the day, these coins are still astronomical in market cap, right? It's just, I think a lot of the underperformance of the altcoins this cycle, I mean, a lot of it is dispersion. I think the most of it is dispersion. Like you have just too many. But also, like when you go through the top 10, top 100 coins, these are so fucking big, right? Market cap wise. And then like, even though they're down like 70% against Bitcoin, 80, 90%, some of them, right? Like Link, for example, just because we used it as an example like earlier, that is down 89% against Bitcoin from its all-time high. Like that's absolutely brutal. And it's still such a huge market cap. Let me check what it actually is. Yeah, it's number 16. And like, I mean, just look at it. I don't know if you have it open, but it's just fucking like these are ginormous market caps.
Oh, they're enormous.
For what they actually do in the real world, right? And
also, I don't have it open because I'm scared if I type C in my search history. I mean, God knows, right?
Like, God knows what's gonna come up. But yeah, it's 6 billion. So
oh my God.
Like, I mean, that's big, right?
Yeah, but then look at Sheeb and stuff. And
yeah, but I mean, I think that's the crazy part, right? Like relative to Dogecoin and Sheeb and like a bunch of others, XRP is still 31 billion, right? And that's down only. That's been down only for the longest time. If you do it relative, like if you're like Chainlink is 6, XRP is 31.
Easy 5x.
Oh, I mean, that's such a brain dead like trade.
By the way, I've never seen anyone make any money with that type of logic, or at least 9.9 times out of 10 it fails, where they do the whole, oh, if X reaches the market cap of Y, I will make this much money, therefore I'll buy it. Like, it's so bad. I've seen it done for centralized exchange coins. I've seen it done for like French coins and memes. I think as soon as you start doing those types of calculations, actually a better
sell everything, walk away. But yeah, so relative to other coins, you can make a lot of arguments like, hey, this should be worth more. And I think if you go at it like very simplistically, not like the way you did with like, oh, if this goes to that market cap, but if you're just like, I think this should be valued more in comparison to other stuff, like that can be a decent trade, right? Like let's say you buy Link over something else because you think it should be more valuable. I think in the long run that might actually work out just fine for you. It's just okay, if Link goes to that market cap, I'm gonna be rich thing that's gonna fuck you over. Yes. But just generally, like if you compare this to the real world and what's happening there and what companies and like the stuff is worth, this is still a lot. Is all I'm saying. And I mean, yeah, crypto has promise and everything, but I think this cycle is basically a lot of that. Basically, people realizing like, hey, this is actually still very expensive, and there's infinite amounts of them. Yes. So like pumping them is really, really hard. And then on top of all of that, you realize that the tokens actually like that a lot of these protocols don't need tokens, and that a lot of these coins shouldn't exist. And then you run into troubles.
There's no revenue accrual or value accrual mechanism either. No fee switch because the US is so scary. Yeah.
Yes,
it's like
exactly.
Fundamentally detached.
So I think that's why basically the price action has been so shit on a lot of this.
Yeah. Kind of very, very intuitive to us, but for someone getting into the space, extremely counterintuitive. But it's like, if you don't learn that, you're fucked, basically.
Yeah.
Like, oh, but I use Lido every day. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
I love Arbitrum to bridge to Hyperliquid or something. It's like, I've got news for you.
Yeah, Lido is another example of something else. I mean, the market cap of Lido has just been giga mooning. It's because there's so many. I mean, they're just dumping on your head basically. I mean, like legit. This basically this. If you go on Coin Market Cap and then you go on Lido and you go on you go and toggle market cap. I mean, that's been like not that bad. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
It's just the problem is basically, I mean, the market cap is going up because there's more and more coins, not because the price is going up.
Yes. And there's new coins. I mean, their price impact has been reasonably self-evident.
Yeah.
This used to be like one of the meta picks, if you recall, for like early cycle. It's like heat narrative, restaking, it's liquid staking, etc. Like, ouch.
And that's the whole like TVL argument where you're like, this is. And I mean, Lido is a decent protocol, and like
I mean, it does what it says, right?
Yeah, and I mean,
not a functional monopoly, but like in terms of market share, it's successful by all metrics, right?
Yeah, but it's still down like 42% this year. Like,
yeah. Oh man.
And I mean, this year's not been that bad. Like, so that's that's the thing, you know. Like, this whole like, okay, how much is this worth, locked versus unlocked, like all that kind of stuff doesn't matter in day to day, but it will matter long term, right? So people that bought this thing for long term, they really should have looked at TVL. People that bought this because it was hyped by like on Twitter and like because people look at basically what it does and they're like, oh, this does what it says it does, and it's quite cool. This should go up, right? And then it's in the minds of everyone, and then it goes up, right? And it can 2x, 3x, whatever, and it was a really good trade for a very short amount of time.
Yes.
Like that was like 3x while nothing else moved basically, but then the TVL caught up with it, and I think that's something that we have to know. Like what time frames you're trading on and what methods you have to use, because for example for me, like I don't really care about TVL because I don't really like, I mean I do, but I don't really trade altcoins for too long, right? Like I'm buying an altcoin and I'm gonna sell it like a week later or something anyway. So it doesn't really matter to me. It matters more whether there's eyes on or not. But if you're trading these things in like on a long time horizon, or maybe even investing in it, your methodology has to be very, very different, because you actually have to know this stuff.
Yeah, it's like I'm day trading momentum, but there are unlocks in 6 months, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Bit of a mismatch. Yeah. Well, but also, Don, Lido support 97 cents on the weekly. Lowest close. Are you all in? Should I go all in? This is another episode of Don Gives Me Financial Advice.
Did you just completely curse the thing? Like, because last time it like fucking Popcat went to 0 afterwards.
Well, it depends on what you tell me to do, I guess.
No, I mean, it's a decent support. I said the exact same thing. It's a decent support.
Okay, decent support. Is that a code word for down 50%?
It's a decent support, but I mean, why the fuck is it back here? You know, like that's the same, and it's pretty much exactly the same that I said for Popcat. Like, yeah, it's a good support. Yeah, you can like make an argument, but like, why? Like, I don't know why would you want to buy this? Like, I think some of these assets, right? And I mean, this is completely ignoring the fundamental side of things. Just if the price action is too bad, they're kind of torched, right? Like, I think you can literally, with too bad price action, you can torch your coin no matter how good it is. Like, if the price action is this horrendous and people know it for being shit, there's a good chance that it's just going to underperform forever. Like Litecoin, for example, being one example, where it's like price action has been so shit that it's just kind of torched now. Doesn't really matter what they do, unless they get in fucking ETF.
Oh god.
And then there's going to be Litecoin trades.
Also, for our audience, I think Woo is working on copy trading type of stuff. I think it'd be really funny if we were to take like a humorous approach to it, and I asked Don for financial advice to counter trade on these random fucking shit coins if they're listed on Woo, and just, you know, we can call the section counter trade Casual Friday or counter trade Don or something of that nature. And just
why does it have to be me?
And just based off of these humorous off the cuff ad hoc discussions, just like punt random shit and see how it does. I think that might be quite fun. If that's at all interesting, let us know in the comments. And also, if you want to be ready for it, you can, if you want to, sign up to woo by the link in the description below. But it's your life, and we're not particularly competent or well-trained affiliate shills. So do whatever you want, but if that sounds at least fun, and the whole point of it is fun, given most of the show is like serious-ish discussion, let us know, and we can come up with like a fun version of this. Because copy trading is like normally super cringe. It affects the execution of the person who's being copy traded, both in terms of like psychologically, but also then the fill prices. Your alpha decay is like very quick. Social pressure, like all this type of stuff, and there have been some very high-profile cases of people blowing up on crypto Twitter for like copy trading stuff, and then they eat shit and people hate them forever. It's just I don't think it's a particularly good endeavor. I know of exactly 0 instances where someone's like, oh, I made it in crypto, just like copy trading someone via a centralized exchange's copy trading feature. It kind of just doesn't happen for good reason, but it can be just like a fun addition to a Friday show or a separate show even. So if that's interesting, let us know. For now, final 2 pieces, Don. I mean, this one's very quick. Morgan Stanley reveals 187 million position in BlackRock's spot Bitcoin ETF. And I think Goldman Sachs did as well. And I think 2 things are coming to the forefront here. Like, if it is directional flow and they're just like buying with market impact and are sort of long only, then where the fuck where are the green candles? Right?
I mean, Germany and America are selling
exactly. So there's like sufficient supply to like overshadow both the material flows from these type of things and also like news-based market impact, if that makes sense. Like people buying because banks are buying and I'm going to buy with them. And then the second point, if that's not true and it's not sort of directional long only type of exposure, then probably the second best explanation is that this is kind of funding, quarterly futures arbitrage type of stuff going on,
most
or
likely,
ETF arbitrage, or some other form of delta neutral participation where you get basically a bait and switch between big bank, big number, they're buying, they're long, I'm going to trade with them, but they don't actually have directional exposure to the thing. In either case, at the moment, it's like annoyingly in your face, because if it is delta, then it's not delta enough, and if it's not delta, then it's just a bait and switch because some arbitrage delta neutral yield farming meme.
Still think that's good, like for the numbers. Not for like, I generally think there's a big discrepancy between like something being good for Bitcoin and like altcoin prices.
Yeah,
and
true.
Like something being good for the space itself. I think a lot of these, like this ETF stuff, is actually quite bad for the space. Just because if it goes like ETFs usually go, the ETF is going to overshadow most of the price action. Like it's just going to be like an ETF show. Like that's been how the world has worked, right? Like everything's just starting to like move into these ETFs, and then at some point you're going to have like half of all the Bitcoin in an ETF, and that's kind of defeating the purpose in my opinion. But that's going to be really good for price, right? Because like the ETF's going to get sold less, people are going to have stronger hands, liquidity is going to be really good, like all that kind of stuff. It's just like it does, and I mean, there's a reason why the gold bugs, right, like are complaining so much about like the paper gold, like all of that, like that it's not real and whatever. Just it's not necessarily good for the asset itself, but for price, I think it is. So I just wanted to make that clear. But I think just generally these banks and whatever, just like that, like dipping their toes. And for me, and I'm not an expert, it's more likely that they just do arbitrage and like I don't think they're taking bets necessarily on Bitcoin going up.
Yeah.
But it's obviously still like that gives the whole, like that gives other people the go ahead, right? Like people, and this is something that happens a lot. Like just think back on the FTX story, for example, which I mean at the end turned out really terribly, but the supposed story was anyway that they moved into crypto to arbitrage, right? Like a bunch. And then at some point they stopped doing that and did a bunch of other shit, illegal stuff on top.
Theft mostly,
But like, I think that's the story for a lot of these like sophisticated actors.
Yes.
They're going to do arbitrage first, and then they're going to be in it, and then they're going to see like there's just going to be like a subdivision or whatever that like takes advantage of like price swings, and then like it starts going that way, right? Like it's the story of everyone in crypto, really. Like you dip your toes and then you see what other people do, and you see like how much this shit moves, and you're like, oh shit, and then you start moving deeper and deeper, and at some point you're like 50x long Bitcoin, and you're like, what the fuck happened to me?
Yeah. I think you're right, and also just if we're talking about like more passive allocation and pension funds and nation states, all that type of stuff, you got to start somewhere, right? So like if the banks start with arbitrage or whatever, that's a good start, and then as you mentioned, it kind of hopefully it snowballs into more institutional recognition, and then recognition and sort of social consensus turns into adoption. But I think people just expect that type of stuff to happen within like weeks or a single cycle, but just from a reputational, regulatory perspective, the shit takes ages. So I still
I mean,
rather be
imagine
in an ETF world than not in general.
like if you've been arbitraging like crypto for 10 years and you make the argument like, hey, maybe we want to move into this like a little bit more permanently, like with a little bit like skin in the game, like people are not going to bat an eye. But like expecting a bank to go all in Bitcoin, or like a country to go all in Bitcoin, like that's just silly. Only the really dumb do this, which is us basically, right?
Yes.
Like they're really dumb and unprepared. Those are the ones that are just like, oh yeah, this is cool, let me just push all
Make
my
it my
networks in.
life. Yeah.
Like this is not how it works. Like you have to like reasonable like institutions and people, and I would hope that like banks and like, I mean, people are going to argue me on this, but like governments and banks are going to be somewhat like at least process driven, right? They're like, okay, we're going to go slow. I think that makes a lot of sense over the, okay, they should all be going all in, that I'm seeing everywhere. Like I think that argument is just
like the whole strategic reserve type of thing, and that's going to ignite global FOMO. At least less. I mean, the truth is often less sexy. That it's going to be slow, cumbersome. There has to be lobbying, regulatory barriers, political jockeying, so on and so forth. But at least the infrastructure is there. The last note is Polymarket has Kamala Harris at 53%, Don, to win.
I mean, I think she's probably going to win. And I'm shocked to say this because, I mean, I was like, after Trump got almost assassinated, I was like, there's no way that he's going to lose. But kind of like, he's kind of been fumbling a lot. And I mean, I'm not saying this as a person that dislikes like Trump. I mean, I do dislike him as a person, but it's just from like, even just generally like from what's been happening, it's just been like all over the place. And it just kind of seems like that's not going the way Trump wants it to go. Like that whole situation, I don't know if you agree or not, but like what I've been seeing from him has been like just surprisingly bad in like just even comparing himself to himself, right? Before, like I think he's just been like completely caught off guard with the whole like exchanging candidates, right? Like, and it's just been not going so great.
I mean, he was prepared for Biden. He was preparing for Biden. All the marketing, PR.
Yeah, he got rugged. Straight up.
He basically got rugged. And then also his VP hire hasn't, I think, has worked against him with JD Vance. He's getting memed a lot now. And also, I think just the news cycle switched so quickly from assassination attempt to Kamala Harris is the Democrat incumbent now. And so I think strategically it would have been a lot better poll-wise if he were able to ride the assassination thing and then keep hitting on the Biden pain points that were working. Those two things put together. And again, this is amateurish political commentary, so feel free to phrase it out completely. But I think that would have been a much stronger formula. Like he was already optically sort of beating Biden, and then the assassination thing, that's like the supercharge, and then you sort of march to the White House. But now you got rugged on Biden, and the assassination thing isn't even in the news anymore. It's all sort of Kamala focused and JD Vance focused and all this other stuff. Tim Waltz, and people don't give a shit. But I think in general, purely price wise, I think a Kamala presidency would be worse for crypto than Trump.
I mean, I think straight up. I think there's a good chance that they're just actually gonna be like quite against
offensive. Yeah, completely. Especially with like Elizabeth Warren and other Democrat incumbents being so anti-crypto, and
I think a little bit of it is like the crypto industry, like especially after the assassination attempt and like around that time, the crypto industry just heavily went in like Camp Trump, right? And also did like, I mean, I saw a bunch of stuff that they said and did that like it's just like quite a bit over the top. Where I think it's just very strategic mistake from a lot of the leaders in our space, because with how the politics in America are, right, like with very much like you're either us or you're not, like this whole like you're either friend or foe, nothing in between. If you kind of like put too heavy of a stance as an industry, like you're like, yeah, we all like Trump, you put yourself in a little bit of a shitty situation, and that is kind of like, I think we're kind of in this situation now where if like it's just generally gonna be worse if Trump loses.
We just get punched in the mouth because the vast majority of our lobbying efforts have been for Republicans. And again,
Yeah,
I don't
exactly.
think that's an unjustified view, right? Like even forgetting, I mean, I don't like single issue voting. And I mean, Trump as a politician, whatever, not like super enthused. But then again, British politics also sucks. So I'm not speaking from a position of power here.
Yeah.
But just in general, like the industry very clearly sort of over-indexed on Trump and the Republican Party at the expense of building any goodwill with Democrats. And also the Democrats don't really give a shit. The only thing I'll say in defense, and I think this is an important point, I can completely understand why the industry swung pro-Republican.
Oh, 100%.
Because
yeah.
the Democrats with Operation Choke Point or Chokehold or whatever it's called, and their general stance towards crypto, and Gensler and, you know, Biden, all the legislation that's been pushed through, it's been so fucking anti-crypto that I totally understand why people focus their lobbying efforts on the Republican nominee. It just means, but there's always a cost to that, right? Like,
Yes.
You swing too hard that way, if you lose, they'll see that, and they'll see all the funding you put in to finance the opposition, and if your side loses, you're gonna get punched in the mouth for it, and that's us basically. We basically, like, Bitcoin almost became like a Trump win proxy bet. And now that that's shifted, that we're seeing it in the market. And even just like short-term price action wise, you know, the price action that we had with Trump going out in the Bitcoin conference and saying he'll fire a Gensler and the lead up to it, all this type of stuff, everything looked fucking sick. And the strategic reserve thing, people were literally saying we're about to break all-time high and ignite global FOMO of all the countries buying and Trump's win. You know, mentally they were pricing in not only Trump's win, but also pricing in a Trump win plus Gensler fired plus strategic reserve type of thing. And then once the odds shifted, it's like, oh, well, all of those assumptions are now under threat, and I have to pivot, basically. And that I think that's definitely been a source of supply and sell pressure in the market, basically swinging and over-indexing on Trump and a Trump win, and then being faced with the reality of the polling as it is now, and being like, oh shit, well, if I'm wrong, not only am I wrong on all the bullish stuff, but it's actually quite bearish because we've just been funding the opposition, and if we lose, then they'll fucking punch us in the mouth, basically.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with you that it's like that. I get why the entire crypto industry basically went for Trump, because I mean, like you said, I think crypto's been so battered by the Democrats mostly. I mean, it started off like the Republicans also. Trump, like, very famously, like, said that he fucking hates crypto basically for the longest time, right? It's not like this has been any different, but just like in the last couple of years, the Democrats just been going after it so much that it's totally like understandable. I just think it was a really dumb move. Like, it was just like, sometimes you have to, like, someone punches you in the face, you know, like the Democrats have done to crypto, and sometimes you just like really cannot punch back, right? Like, I don't think crypto is in a position where it can punch back like that. But I mean, I get it. I get why you would want to punch back. I might punch back. Like, if I was in that situation, I might have punched back myself, right?
Well, like the boxing analogy would be, someone throws a hard shot. Your incentive might be to throw a hard shot back. But if you miss, you're just going to eat another hard shot, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well said.
Maybe you roll out of it or slip or something, you know?
Yeah. Should have.
Tie up, but instead,
I think. Like, going all
sucks,
in.
Dude. Like, I get it, but it fucking sucks if
like,
Democrats just win purely from a crypto perspective, not politics.
Yeah. I mean, just, you would hope that the leaders of our industry would be smart enough to know that this wasn't like, that this was just not the thing to do. But then again, I can also like somewhat justify it just by, it looked so certain that Trump was gonna win before they did the switcheroo, right?
Yes.
So it's kind of like you're betting very publicly on like an almost sure thing, and then they fucking rug you. And I mean, like, Biden was such a bad candidate that I totally understand how people are like, okay, this is just a surefire thing. And I'm guessing that's why Trump picked Vance as well, because he was like, doesn't really matter.
Doesn't matter, yeah.
Like, we have literal potato on the other side. So it's kind of like, I think that's basically it. But now we're in the situation, like you said, that we're a little bit reliant on Trump winning. And I don't really think that's going to be the case. But I also think crypto is not going to go to zero. Like a bunch of people are like, hey, altcoins are going to go to zero if Trump doesn't win. I think that's a little bit bullshit. I think crypto did just fine under Trump, and Trump was against it. Crypto did just fine under the Democrats.
And they're like in your face against it.
Yeah, so I really don't think that's like, it's just a short-term thing.
Yes.
You're going to get like a Democrat president, you're going to get a dip, basically, is what I think, or like a couple months of bad price action. And that's it. I don't think it's going to necessarily change the trajectory of crypto at all. Yeah, it's just going to be a little bit harder. But also, I think like taking crypto as like this whole like, okay, I'm going to vote based on crypto seems kind of silly to me, given there's like big problems in the world. Crypto isn't necessarily the one, like the hill that I would die on as a person. But I mean, that I think everyone can pick for themselves.
Yeah, that's like a personal thing, right? Like single issue voting. It's very easy if you're a single person in crypto, just working for yourself between the ages of like 18 and 30, libertarian minded, etc. And just kind of crypto is your life, and you vote for the thing that's most prescient and most important for you. But then if you have like a family and you have a community, maybe you're slightly older, so on and so forth, you care about other things and they enter your orbit, it becomes harder to vote for the sort of marginally better candidate for crypto.
Yeah, and one thing I want to say, right, and I mean, people are like, because I mean, most of our, like, at least the American audience is Republican, I think.
Sure.
But the one thing that I want to say is that like Trump has promised a lot, right, and he has kept very little of these promises. And I would not want to bet like, if Trump, and I mean, he can still become president, right? It's not like it's super unlikely. He's just less favored right now. But if he becomes president, I wouldn't necessarily want to bet on like just generally crypto doing so amazingly well.
Or like all the best case stuff playing out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I just generally think Trump says a lot and he doesn't necessarily do everything he says. He's just saying a lot to basically, I mean, and that's
politics, right?
Yeah, I was just about to say that's what a lot of parties do. It's just with Trump, he says over the top things a lot.
Yes.
Where it's more visible, right? Like I think Trump is one of the people in politics that just basically like promises the world, and then maybe he gives you something, but it's probably not as much as he promised. So I'd be a little bit careful on that front too. But I think it's pretty clear that the Republican side would be more favorable to crypto than the Democrat side.
Yeah, just so even there's a base case type of thing. And yeah, like it just sucks because Democrats have just been so bad faith, not even just like anti-crypto as a policy position. I think you can defend that if you want to, and I can reasonably disagree, but there's room for like a reasonable discourse there. But it feels like from a regulatory approach and how the SEC has handled itself and some of the legislation, so on and so forth, it's been like bad faith against crypto. And I think that part, when you start to sort of bypass proper procedural and good faith engagements, that's what makes it really hard to stomach. So like the whole situation's fucked basically. We turned into like a Trump win coin. Now the odds have shifted, and then you want to blame them, being like, oh, you industry leaders, you're so dumb, you're like over-indexed on Trump now, and you gave him all this money, etc. Now if the Republicans lose, we're really going to get fucked. But at the same time, there's a completely reasonable counter argument that like, what did you want us to do? Did you want us to like vote for the Democrats who've been trying to kill, I mean, maybe a bit of an exaggeration, but like in reasonable terms, trying to kill crypto this entire time? They're just like, as usual in politics, no right answers, everyone's lying, normal people get fucked. So that's been your segment on a random Londoner and a German dude talking about US politics. I'm fucking hope everyone tuned out for that one.
Yeah. I mean, we shouldn't. But I think like, and this is, I think, solely missing in the discourse. Just like outsiders talking from time to time, like people that see it from the outside. Because I mean, like you see, like your side talks so much, and then you sometimes see like snippets of the other side, right? Like what the most outrageous thing like Democrats have said, or the most outrageous thing that Trump has said, like just small like 30-second clips that make the other person like look horrendous. And I think it's quite like just generally for political discourse, even if you don't agree, and I think most people will not agree with what we've said, just listening to other people that have a different opinion and just like building your own opinion, like making it stronger or like reconsidering things, just very helpful. But Sadly, that's not necessarily how politics works anymore. Nowhere in the world, but especially like just from an outsider perspective, especially in America, it's very, very hard to actually just like be like, this person is from another party or from like another viewpoint, and I'm gonna listen anyway. Like that's, I think, it's been getting more and more toxic on that front, which is a little bit sad. I think it's quite important.
Yeah.
So maybe that helps.
Study radical centrism.
No, I mean, no, I like, I'm not saying like people should be like, I tend to gravitate towards the center, yeah. But I don't think people should necessarily do that, but I think they should at least know what the other, like the other side is actually saying, and not just these stupid clips that you see on the internet. Because I've seen a lot of clips from Trump that make him sound like Hitler. And I've seen a lot of clips from like Democrats that make them seem like totalists, like absolute insane people that don't want anything to do with like personal freedom and like personal choice. And I think neither of those are true. And there is some truth to some of it, obviously, but you kind of have to like take these like small clips and actually put them into context, because
but that's work. I'd rather just be rage baited immediately.
Yeah.
And also, Twitter has been fucking dog shit. Like,
I mean, fucking terrible.
It's cooked.
No, I mean, like, Twitter is just like fucking Nazis, like straight up Nazis now. It's like, at least in the For You, in the For You page, like you cannot live anymore. Like you look at this and you're like, what the fuck?
I always preferred it when I just go on For You. Like my entire following is crypto, and I go on For You, and it's like 6 people getting killed. You know, those types of videos.
Yeah, fucking bad. Like, like straight up, I don't know what Elon is doing, but the crazy part about this, and I'm gonna go on a tangent.
Yeah, go on.
Is I legit think, and I mean, this is not even politically based, but just generally, like, I think Elon Musk is just kind of like getting more and more radicalized by his own algorithm somehow.
Dude, yeah, he's been captured by his own algorithm. It's so funny. Like, you can just do this. Go to his replies, and it's always like some end wokeness, whatever type of page, posting some like half-truth. And then he'll just always comment like, "Wow!" exclamation mark, or concerning, like, full stop, and that's like 80% of his piece.
Like Facebook mom comments where I'm like, "What the fuck happened to this dude?"
Yeah,
like,
it's unreal.
And I mean, there's not even political, right? This is just like commenting on the downfall of him as a person. Like he seems like he's just scouring Twitter to get outraged, right? And he used to be this kind of guy that was like, and I mean, he still does that, but he used to be the guy that was kind of driving humanity forward. And now it just kind of feels like a lot of his time is just spent being outraged.
It's such a bad use of his brain.
I mean, the guy's a genius. Shit, the guy's like on a lot of levels.
Yeah, like,
so I'm like, what is he doing?
Like, this is and this is his own platform. That's the best part.
Yeah, and it's getting worse with every day. Like, the more he spends time on it, the worse it gets. And I'm just like, I mean, I guess that the algorithm is working in the way that it keeps him on the platform, you know? Yeah. But it does remind me of like all these like 40, 50, 60-year-old people on Facebook that are getting into the wildest shit, right?
AI generated stuff a lot of the time.
Yeah, where I'm like, dude, just stop. And with Elon, it's been interesting.
The thing is, it does capture like objectively smart people. There have been a couple cases of people DMing me like, "Hey, bro, like, hope you're safe in the UK with all this stuff going on." I'm like, how representative do you think those clips are of like a normal day or the state of the country, like what you're seeing? You know, it's very strange.
Like the entire country is burning. Yeah. I didn't even ask you how you were doing, because like, I mean, obviously, like this is just kind of like what people think. It's the same with the whole Europe is gonna be freezing in the winter. It's like, this is not how the world works, my dudes. But yeah,
well, Dom, we managed to give people a preview of the future of Technical Roundup once we both quit trading and crypto. It'll be like 10 minutes of monthly charts, terrible. And then dog shit, uninformed politics the entire time.
But there you go.
Fantastic.
Hope you subscribe.
Yeah, exactly. If you're still here, I mean, definitely subscribe for more content like this. Leave a like on this video before we leave. We'd appreciate it. Leave us a comment if you want the copy trading meme, if you want the Futures Monday meme, or just in general, if you have anything to tell us. thank you for sitting through this. Apologies for the inconsistent cadence of the show. And the ending, and just sorry in general for everything. The only thank you goes to Woo for somehow supporting this show. Although if they watch it the whole way, we'll probably have to have a chat with them pretty soon. That's all from us. Hope you have a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.